9 Appalachian Mountain horror stories from Forest Ranger experiences.
Welcome to the North. Welcome to the Dark North Stories. I've been a forest ranger in the Appalachians for almost 15 years now, and I've seen a lot of strange things out in these mountains. Now the question is what the worst things I have witnessed in these woods are. The one that night when I over-celebrated my wife's birthday exactly at 12 a.m. And in excitement what I did wrong, I desperately forgot the rule and ultimately, you would say, went against a rule set by the control room and other rangers who worked there for a long time before my posting to that specific tower. From that night, things went really weird and wild. I am your host, and today we are diving into the Appalachia Mountains horror from not the average hikers and campers, but the one that's secure and informs us about weather conditions and land necessities. The Root Cellar. I've been a forest ranger in the Appalachians for almost 15 years now, and I've seen a lot of strange things out in these mountains. But the worst thing I ever encountered wasn't even in the forest. It was in my own house. My wife Sarah and I bought the place about 3 years ago, an old farmhouse built sometime in the 1880s, tucked away on 40 acres that bordered the national forest where I work. It was a fixer-upper for sure, but the price was right, and honestly, I loved the idea of living right on the edge of my patrol area. The isolation didn't bother us. We're both the type who prefer trees to neighbors. The house had good bones, as they say. Original hardwood floors, a stone fireplace that still worked perfectly, and that authentic character you just can't get in new construction. The previous owner had been an elderly woman named Mrs. Hutchins who'd passed away in a nursing home. Her family just wanted to unload the property quickly, which explained the low asking price. They didn't mention any problems with the house, and our inspector didn't find anything beyond the usual old house issues. We spent the first few months doing basic renovations. New roof, updated electrical in most rooms, fresh paint throughout. It was during this initial phase that we discovered the root cellar. I'd known there was a cellar, of course. The access was through a door in the kitchen floor, the kind you'd normally see leading to a storm shelter. But we'd been so focused on the main living areas that we hadn't really explored it yet. When we finally pulled open that heavy wooden door and climbed down the ladder, we expected something small, maybe 8 by 8, just deep enough to store preserved foods and keep them cool. Instead, we found ourselves in a room that stretched back at least 20 feet, with a ceiling high enough for me to stand upright. The walls were unmortared stone, the kind of construction you see in really old Appalachian buildings, fitted so precisely that you couldn't slide a knife blade between most of the rocks. The floor was packed dirt, hard as concrete from decades of compression. "This is amazing," Sarah said, playing her flashlight across the space. "Look how much storage we have." She was right. There were empty wooden shelves along both walls, old mason jars still sitting on some of them, cloudy with dust. A few ancient potato sacks lay in one corner, long since rotted through. The air was cool and dry, perfect for a root cellar, with just a faint smell of earth. But there was something else too. At the very back of the room, partially hidden behind one of the shelving units, there was another door. I moved the shelf aside, it was lighter than it looked, and studied the door more carefully. It was older than the house itself, I could tell that immediately. Rough-hewn wood, black with age, held together with hand-forged nails. And carved into its surface, worn almost smooth but still visible, were symbols I didn't recognize. Not quite letters, not quite pictures, something in between. "Should we open it?" Sarah asked, standing close behind me. I tried the handle. It didn't budge. Looking closer, I could see there was no lock, at least not a conventional one. The door was sealed shut, whether by time or design, I couldn't tell. "Let's leave it for now," I said, feeling an unease I couldn't quite explain. "We've got enough projects to deal with upstairs." Sarah agreed, and we headed back up. But over the next few weeks, I found my thoughts returning to that door more often than made sense. What was behind it? Another room? A tunnel? Some old-timers in these mountains had dug pretty extensive root cellars, even small cave systems to store food. But those symbols bothered me. I tried researching them online, even took a photo to show some of the older folks who'd lived in the area their whole lives. Nobody recognized them. One elderly man at the general store in town looked at the photo for a long time, then handed it back to me without a word and walked away. When I tried to follow him, the store owner, his daughter, quietly suggested I leave it alone. "Some things in these mountains are old business," she said. "Best left that way." That should have been warning enough. But curiosity is a powerful thing. Or maybe it wasn't just curiosity. Maybe the door itself wanted to be opened. I started hearing sounds at night. At first, I dismissed them as the house settling, old wood expanding and contracting with temperature changes. But they were too rhythmic for that, too deliberate. A soft scraping sound, like something being dragged across stone. It always came from below, from the direction of the cellar. Sarah heard it too, though she tried to rationalize it the same way I did initially. "Old houses make noise," she'd say, pulling the covers up higher. But I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way she'd lie awake staring at the ceiling after the sound started. The scraping came every night around 2 a.m., lasting anywhere from 5 minutes to half an hour. Sometimes it was accompanied by other sounds, softer ones that might have been whispers if you let yourself think about it too much. I didn't let myself think about it. Then one night, about 2 months after we discovered the second door, I heard something different. Footsteps. Not the heavy footsteps of an intruder, not boots on the floor above. These were bare feet on packed dirt, slow and deliberate, pacing back and forth in the root cellar beneath our bedroom. Back and forth, for hours. I grabbed my flashlight and my service pistol and headed downstairs before I could talk myself out of it. Sarah called after me, begging me not to go down there, but I had to know. I had to see what was in my house. The kitchen was dark and cold, colder than it should have been even for October. My breath misted in the air as I pulled open the cellar door. The ladder creaked under my weight as I descended, my flashlight cutting through the darkness below. The root cellar was empty. The footsteps had stopped the moment I opened the door. But something was different. The shelving unit I'd moved away from the back door was back in place, pushed tight against the wall. And the door itself, the old door with the strange symbols, was open. Just a crack, maybe an inch, but definitely open. A smell wafted out from whatever lay beyond, not unpleasant exactly, but strange. Like old earth and something else, something organic and ancient that I had no reference for. I should have gone back upstairs. Every instinct I'd developed in 15 years of ranger work was screaming at me to retreat. But I was in my own home, and I couldn't live with an open door in my basement that I was too afraid to investigate. I pulled it open wider, the hinges silent despite their obvious age, and shone my light through. A tunnel, hand-carved through solid rock, sloping downward into the mountain. The walls showed tool marks, evidence of painstaking work over what must have been years. And every few feet, carved into the stone, were more of those symbols. But that wasn't what made my blood run cold. It was the footprints. Bare footprints in the dust, dozens of them, maybe hundreds, all leading deeper into the tunnel. Small prints, like a child's, and larger ones. They overlapped and circled, some so old they were barely visible, others so fresh they could have been made moments ago. And at the edge of my flashlight's beam, just at the limit of visibility, I saw where they all led. There was something down there in the darkness. A chamber of some kind. I could tell from the way the tunnel opened up. And in that chamber, I could make out shapes. Vertical shapes, man-sized, arranged in a circle. My hands were shaking so badly, I nearly dropped the flashlight. I took one step into the tunnel, then another, driven by a compulsion I didn't understand and couldn't resist. The air grew colder with each step, and I began to hear that whispering again, clearer now. Not English, not any language I recognized, but somehow I felt like I should understand it, like the meaning was just beyond my grasp. I was maybe 10 feet into the tunnel when I heard Sarah scream. It broke whatever spell had taken hold of me. I ran back toward the cellar, stumbling in my haste, and scrambled up the ladder. Sarah was standing in the kitchen doorway, her face white, pointing at something behind me. I turned. In the root cellar, illuminated by my dropped flashlight, were footprints. Fresh, wet footprints, like someone had walked through water, leading from the tunnel door to the base of the ladder. Small footprints, child-sized, and they were still appearing, one after another, as if an invisible person was slowly walking toward us. I slammed the cellar door shut and dragged the kitchen table over it. Sarah and I spent the rest of that night in our truck, parked in the driveway, watching the house. We didn't see anything else unusual, but we both knew we couldn't stay there. The next day, I did some serious research. Not online this time, but in the county records office, going through old documents and land deeds. What I found made me understand why Mrs. Hutchins had died in a nursing home rather than her own house, and why her family had been so eager to sell. The property had changed hands 17 times in its recorded history. The average ownership was less than 2 years. 3 families had simply abandoned the house, leaving all their possessions behind. One owner had died in what was ruled an accident, falling down the cellar stairs and breaking his neck. The original owner, the one who built the house in 1882, had been found dead in the root cellar, his body positioned at the tunnel entrance, his face locked in an expression the coroner had described as ecstatic terror. And before the house was built, before any European settlers came to this valley, the Cherokee had a name for this place. I found it in a collection of local folklore at the Historical Society. Roughly translated, it meant where the old ones sleep. We moved out that week. Didn't even go back for most of our stuff. Just grabbed essentials and left. Put the house on the market as is, full disclosure about everything we'd experienced. We took a huge loss, but I didn't care. Some things aren't worth any amount of money. The house sold after 6 months on the market. The new owners were a young couple from out of state. I tried to talk to them, tried to warn them properly, but they just smiled and nodded like I was some superstitious local trying to scare them. They had plans to renovate, to modernize the place. They particularly loved the root cellar, thought it was authentic and charming. I heard through the grapevine that they sealed up the tunnel entrance, poured concrete over it, and bricked it shut. They lasted 3 months before they left in the middle of the night. The house sits empty now, has been for over a year. I drive past it sometimes on my way to work, can't help myself. The door to the root cellar, the one in the kitchen floor, is always standing open when I look through the windows. Always open, even though I know for a fact it's been secured by the real estate company multiple times. Some doors, once opened, can't ever really be closed again. And some things that sleep in the mountains don't appreciate being disturbed. I learned that the hard way, and I carry that knowledge with me every day I patrol these forests, wondering what else might be buried beneath the Appalachian soil, waiting in the dark places we've forgotten to fear. Story second, the trail that doesn't exist. I need to get this down while it's still fresh in my mind, while I can still remember the details clearly. Maybe writing it out will help me make sense of what happened, or maybe it'll just confirm that I'm losing my grip on reality. Either way, I can't keep this to myself anymore. My name is Marcus Webb, and I've been a ranger in the Cherokee National Forest for 8 years. I know these mountains like the back of my hand, or at least I thought I did. I've hiked every marked trail, bushwhacked through unmarked territory, rescued lost hikers, tracked down poachers, and spent countless nights alone in the backcountry. I'm not someone who spooks easily, and I'm not prone to flights of imagination. But what I'm about to tell you challenges everything I thought I knew about these woods. It started 3 months ago, mid-August, during a routine patrol of the northern sector. I was checking trail conditions after a particularly bad storm had blown through the week before, looking for downed trees, washouts, anything that might pose a danger to hikers. The weather was perfect, clear skies, temperature in the low 70s, that crisp mountain air that makes you grateful to be alive. I was about 6 miles into my patrol, following the ridge line trail that eventually connects to the Benton Mackay, when I noticed something off to my left. A path, cutting through the underbrush at a gentle angle down the slope. Now, you have to understand, I'd been up and down this section of trail at least 50 times over the years. I knew every switchback, every landmark, every unofficial spur trail that hikers had worn into the landscape. This path wasn't supposed to be there. My first thought was that it was a new, bootleg trail, something hikers had started cutting to avoid a difficult section. It happens more than you'd think, and part of my job is to block off these unauthorized trails and redirect people back to the maintained paths. But as I got closer, I realized this wasn't some recent creation. The path was well established, the dirt packed hard from years of use. The vegetation cleared back at least 6 feet on either side. What really caught my attention, though, were the trail markers. Official National Forest Service markers, the brown posts with white lettering, spaced at regular intervals down the path. I could see 3 of them from where I stood, each one marking the trail as clearly as any other in the forest. I pulled out my GPS unit and my trail map. According to both, there was nothing here. No trail, no path, not even an old logging road. Just unbroken forest running down to Wildcat Creek about half a mile away. I checked my position 3 times, absolutely certain I was reading it right. The map showed nothing, but my eyes told a different story. Professional curiosity got the better of me. I marked my current location, took a few photos of the trail entrance, and started down the path. I figured I'd follow it for maybe 15 minutes, just far enough to see where it led and whether it connected to any known trails or roads. Then I'd report it back at the station, and we'd figure out how an entire marked trail had gone missing from our maps. The path descended gradually, well-graded and carefully maintained. Whoever had built this knew what they were doing. The switchbacks were properly angled. There were water bars to prevent erosion, and the trail markers appeared every 100 yards or so, exactly as they should. But there was something else too, something that made the hair on my neck stand up even though I couldn't immediately identify why. It was too quiet. The normal sounds of the forest, birds calling, squirrels rustling through leaves, the distant sound of wind in the trees, all of it seemed muted. Not absent, just distant, like I was hearing it through a thick pane of glass. And the light was different too, greener somehow, filtered through the canopy in a way that seemed wrong for the time of day and season. I'd been walking for about 20 minutes when I came across the first cabin. It sat just off the trail, maybe 30 feet to the right, a small structure built from rough-hewn logs in the old Appalachian style. A ranger cabin, I realized, the kind they built back in the 30s and 40s when the Forest Service was first getting established. We still had a few scattered through the forest, most of them long abandoned and slowly being reclaimed by nature. But this one wasn't abandoned. The porch was swept clean, there were fresh curtains in the windows, and a thin stream of smoke rose from the stone chimney. I approached slowly, calling out the standard greeting. "Forest Service, anyone home?" No answer. I climbed the 3 steps to the porch and knocked on the door. The wood was solid under my knuckles, real and substantial, but still no one answered. The door wasn't locked. I pushed it open and stepped inside, my hand instinctively moving to the radio on my belt. The interior was neat and orderly, a single room with a bunk, a small table, a wood stove, and shelves lined with supplies. Canned goods, a lantern, blankets, first aid kit, everything a backcountry ranger might need for an extended stay. On the table sat a logbook, the kind we use to track visitor numbers and trail conditions. I opened it, expecting to see recent entries, but the handwriting inside made me freeze. The ink was faded but still legible, and the dates went back decades. The most recent entry was from September 15th, 1957. Trail conditions good after recent rain. Spotted black bear near mile marker 4. Adult female with 2 cubs, heading north. Removed fallen oak from path at mile marker 7. No hikers today. Ranger William Moss. I flipped through the pages, going back further. 1956, 1955, 1954. Every entry written in the same careful hand, documenting daily patrols and observations. Whoever Ranger Moss was, he'd been meticulous in his record keeping. But according to the logbook, he'd been stationed here in the 50s, which meant this cabin should have been abandoned for 70 years. I looked around the room again, really looked this time. Everything was clean, yes, but it was also old. The supplies on the shelves were in packaging I didn't recognize, vintage labels and designs. The calendar on the wall showed September 1957. The newspapers stacked beside the bunk were yellowed and brittle, headlines talking about Sputnik and President Eisenhower. My radio crackled, making me jump. Static, nothing but static, with a few broken syllables that might have been words. I tried to respond, to call back to the station, but got nothing but that same dead static. My GPS unit showed my location as the same coordinates where I'd left the main trail, even though I knew I'd been walking for at least half a mile. I should have left right then. Every instinct was telling me something was very wrong. But there was another trail marker visible through the cabin window, and I could see the path continuing downhill. Just a little further, I told myself, just to see where it goes. The second cabin appeared after another 20 minutes of hiking. This one was older, more primitive, and there was no smoke from its chimney. But the door stood open, and inside I found another logbook. This one dated back to the 30s, entries from someone named Ranger Joseph Keller. Same careful documentation, same remote location that didn't exist on any map. It was when I found the third cabin that I started to seriously panic. This one was different from the others, more modern in design, and inside I found equipment I recognized. A digital two-way radio, though it wouldn't turn on. A GPS unit, showing coordinates that made no sense. And a logbook with entries from 2019. Trail conditions deteriorating near mile marker 12. Will request maintenance crew. Strange echo in the valley today. Sounds like voices, but no one there when I investigate. Ranger Michael Chun. I knew Mike Chun. We'd worked together for 2 years before he transferred to a different forest. Or at least, that's what I'd been told. He'd left suddenly, his resignation coming through without any advance warning. I'd always thought it was strange, but people leave jobs all the time. The next entry was dated 3 days later. Can't seem to find my way back to the main trail. GPS is malfunctioning. Radio only picks up static. Trying not to panic. I know these mountains. I'll find my way out. And then, a week after that, I was wrong. I don't know these mountains. Or maybe they don't know me anymore. The trail keeps going, and I keep following it because what else can I do? Past the same cabin 3 times today. Or 3 different cabins that look exactly the same. Starting to see other rangers on the trail ahead, but when I call out they don't respond. They never respond. The entries continued, becoming less coherent, more desperate. The last one was dated exactly 1 month from his first. I understand now. This is where lost trails go, where forgotten paths still exist. I've seen rangers from every decade, all of us walking the same loop, checking the same markers, documenting conditions for reports that will never be filed. Sometimes I see myself ahead on the trail. Tomorrow I think I'll catch up to him. Or maybe he'll catch up to me. Does it matter? My hands were shaking as I closed the logbook. I pulled out my own radio, tried again to reach the station. This time I got something other than static, a voice, faint and distorted, responding to my call. But it wasn't anyone I recognized, and they were using TIN codes we'd stopped using years ago. I ran, dropped the logbook and ran back up the trail, my boots pounding against the packed earth. I didn't care about documentation anymore, didn't care about investigating further. I just needed to get back to the real trail, back to the world I understood. But the trail wasn't the same going back. The markers were still there, but the spacing was wrong. Cabins I hadn't passed on the way down now appeared on my left instead of my right. The forest grew darker even though the sun should have been higher, and that muffled quality to the sound grew more pronounced until I felt like I was hiking through a dream. I don't know how long I walked. My watch had stopped, frozen at the exact moment I'd first stepped onto the trail. The light never changed, staying in that same green-tinged twilight. I passed cabin after cabin, some ancient and falling apart, others pristine and modern. In one I found a ranger from the 80s, his uniform style giving away the era. In another, someone from even earlier, their gear looking like it belonged in a museum. I never saw them exactly, just evidence of their presence. Warm coffee in cups, logbooks with fresh ink, the sense that someone had just stepped out and would be back any moment. It was when I passed the same lightning-struck oak for the 3rd time that I accepted the truth. I was trapped on a loop, walking a trail that existed outside normal space, outside normal time. A path that collected rangers the way other places collect dust. I sat down beside the trail, my back against that burned oak, and tried to think. The trail had to go somewhere, had to connect to something. Paths don't just loop forever. But maybe this one did. Maybe that was the point. A ghost trail, walked by ghost rangers, forever documenting conditions that no one would ever read about. That's when I noticed something I'd missed before. Every cabin I'd passed, every single one, had a back door. I'd only ever used the front, coming and going from the trail. But the back doors, where did they lead? The nearest cabin was maybe 100 yards down the path. I approached it from behind this time, circling through the woods rather than following the trail. The back door was there, just as I'd remembered, and it wasn't locked. I pushed it open and stepped through, and suddenly the sounds of the forest rushed back in full force. Birds, wind, the distant sound of a creek. I was standing in the woods, surrounded by normal forest, and when I checked my GPS it showed my proper location, about a quarter mile from where I'd originally left the main trail. I hiked out as fast as I could, not stopping until I reached my truck. My watch had started working again, and according to it, only an hour had passed since I'd first spotted the trail. 1 hour, even though I'd spent what felt like half a day walking that loop. Back at the station, I filed a report. described the trail, the cabins, the logbooks. I expected skepticism, maybe even concern about my mental state. Instead, my supervisor just nodded slowly and asked me to mark the location on the map. "That's the third report we've had about that area," he said quietly. "Different rangers, different years, always the same description. We've sent crews to investigate, but they never find anything. Just normal forest." He pulled out a file, old and worn, and showed me photos. Rangers I didn't recognize, standing in front of cabins I'd just visited. Reports dating back decades, all describing the same impossible trail. And at the bottom of the file, a list of names. Rangers who'd gone on patrol in that sector and never come back. 14 names, spanning from 1947 to 2019. Michael Chin's name was at the bottom of the list. "You found the back door," my supervisor said. "Most don't. They just keep walking the trail until..." He trailed off, but I understood. Until they became another name in the file. I took a week off after that, told my wife I needed to decompress. I didn't tell her the real reason I'd wake up in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, convinced I could hear footsteps on a packed dirt trail outside our bedroom window. I didn't tell her about the dreams, where I'm back on that trail, walking past cabin after cabin, knowing that eventually I'll find one with my own name in the logbook. I went back to work eventually, because what else could I do? This is my career, my life. But I won't patrol that sector anymore. I traded routes with another ranger, made up an excuse about knee problems on the steep terrain. They didn't question it. Maybe they knew. Maybe everyone who's worked here long enough knows about the trail that doesn't exist, the path that's on no map, but is always there, waiting. Sometimes, on clear days when I'm patrolling other sections of the forest, I'll see it. Just a glimpse between the trees, a trail marker that shouldn't be there, a path cutting through underbrush where no path should exist. And I'll hear it too, faintly. The sound of boots on packed earth, of someone walking the same route over and over, documenting conditions for a report that will never be read. I haven't told anyone else this part, but I keep a logbook in my truck now, just in case, because I'm terrified that one day I'll find myself back on that trail without meaning to, that I'll take a wrong turn or follow a path I don't recognize and end up walking that loop forever. And if that happens, I want there to be some record, some evidence that I was real, that this was all real, that I existed outside of that endless green twilight. The Cherokee had stories about these mountains, about places where time moves differently, where the boundary between the world we know and older worlds grows thin. We dismissed them as folklore, as superstition, but I think they understood something we've forgotten. That there are trails in these mountains that lead to places maps can't show, and once you set foot on them, finding your way back isn't guaranteed. I found the back door. I got out, but I know I was lucky, and I know that luck might not hold a second time. So I stay away from that sector, avoid that ridge line, and I try not to think about the other rangers who are still out there, still walking, still documenting trail conditions that no one will ever read. But sometimes, late at night when I can't sleep, I wonder if they know they're trapped, or if maybe they don't care anymore. If walking that trail forever, lost in the green twilight of a forest that exists outside of time, is really so different from what we do anyway. We're all walking paths that someone else laid down, following markers to destinations we don't fully understand. Maybe the only real difference is that some of us can still pretend we're going somewhere new. 03. The Counting Stones. Look, I know how this is going to sound. I know that what I'm about to tell you seems impossible, maybe even insane. But I need to get this out there, need someone else to know what happened, because I can't carry this alone anymore. My name is David Chun. I'm 42 years old, and I've been a ranger in the Pisgah National Forest for 6 years. Up until 3 weeks ago, I thought I had a pretty good handle on reality. I was wrong. It happened at the Standing Indian Shelter, one of our backcountry sites along the Appalachian Trail. If you've ever done any long-distance hiking in North Carolina, you probably know it. It's a 3-sided wooden structure, pretty basic, just a roof and a floor with enough space for maybe 8 people to sleep. We've got dozens of these shelters scattered throughout the forest, and part of my job is to check on them regularly, make sure they're maintained, that hikers aren't trashing the place, that sort of thing. I'd been up to Standing Indian probably 50 times over the years. It's about a 5-mile hike from the nearest trailhead, elevation gain of around 2,000 feet. Not too difficult, but enough to keep the casual day hikers away. The shelter sits in a clearing surrounded by old-growth hardwoods, and on a clear day you can see for miles. It's one of my favorite spots in the whole forest, peaceful and remote without being too isolated. This was a Tuesday in late September, weather was perfect, and I was doing my usual sweep of the southern shelters. I'd already checked 2 others that morning and was making good time. When I arrived at Standing Indian around 2 in the afternoon, the first thing I noticed was the stones. Someone had been stacking rocks in the clearing around the shelter. Not just a few cairns here and there, but dozens of them, maybe 40 or 50 individual piles arranged in a rough circle. Each stack was maybe a foot high, carefully balanced, the kind of thing that takes time and patience to build. Hikers do this sometimes. It's become this whole trend, building rock towers in scenic spots. Usually I just knock them down, leave no trace principles and all that, but there was something about these that made me pause. They were all exactly the same height. Not approximately the same, exactly the same, like someone had measured them with a ruler. And when I looked closer, I realized each pile contained exactly the same number of stones. I counted one stack, 37 rocks. I counted another, 37. A third pile, same thing, 37 stones in every single stack. It was weird, sure, but not necessarily alarming. Some people are obsessive about this stuff, treat it like meditation or art. I figured someone had spent an afternoon out here getting their zen on, and I was just about to start dismantling them when I noticed the logbook. Every shelter has one, a weatherproof notebook where hikers can leave messages, document their journey, share trail conditions, or just random thoughts. I always check them during my patrols. Usually it's pretty mundane stuff, mileage updates, complaints about mice, occasionally something funny or profound. But when I opened the logbook at Standing Indian, the most recent entry made my skin crawl. It was dated 3 days earlier, written in a shaky hand that suggested either exhaustion or fear. Day 3. They're still here. The piles of stones. I knocked them all down on the first night, but they were back by morning. Same number. Always 37. Last night, I heard someone counting in the woods. Male voice, calm, steady, counting to 37 over and over. When he reached 37, he started again at 1. This went on for hours. I never saw anyone. I'm leaving at first light. To anyone reading this, don't touch the stones. The entry wasn't signed, but there was a date and time. 3 days ago, around midnight. I stood there in the clearing, the afternoon sun warm on my face, and felt cold anyway. The writer said they'd knock down the stones and they'd come back. That didn't make sense. Who would rebuild them? And why? I looked around the clearing more carefully. The shelter itself was empty, no signs of recent occupation beyond some mouse droppings and a few scraps of trash I bagged up. The fire ring showed evidence of a recent fire, ashes still relatively fresh. Whoever had written that entry had definitely been here. I pulled out my radio and called back to the station. Hey, Mike, you got a minute? I'm at Standing Indian, and there's a weird entry in the logbook. Someone reported hearing voices in the woods 3 nights ago. We have any missing hiker reports from this area? Static, then Mike's voice crackling through. Negative on missing hikers. What kind of voices? Says they heard someone counting. Look, it's probably nothing, but I'm going to stick around for a bit, check the area, maybe stay until dark to see if anyone shows up. Copy that. Check in at 1800 hours. I spent the next few hours doing a thorough search of the surrounding area. Found the usual stuff, a few old campsites, some trash that people had tried to bury instead of pack out, deer trails winding through the undergrowth. But no sign of anyone else, and no explanation for the stone piles. As the sun got lower, I started thinking about that logbook entry. The person said they'd heard counting at night. If I wanted to figure out what was going on, I needed to stay after dark. I had my camping gear with me, plenty of food and water, and I'd done overnight patrols before. I radioed Mike, told him I was staying the night, and settled in to wait. I didn't knock down the stone piles. I told myself it was because I wanted to see if anyone came back to rebuild them, but honestly, I think I was already spooked. There was something unsettling about them. The precision, the repetition, the perfect circle they formed. They felt intentional in a way I couldn't quite articulate. Sunset came and went. I made a small fire, ate my dinner, and tried to read a book by headlamp. The forest got dark fast once the sun was down, that absolute darkness you only get miles from any artificial light. The fire pushed back the shadows maybe 10 feet in any direction. Beyond that was just blackness and the sounds of the night forest. Wind in the trees, the occasional animal rustling through the underbrush, an owl calling in the distance. Normal sounds, comforting sounds, right up until 11:47 p.m. when someone started counting. 1. The voice came from somewhere in the darkness beyond my fire, male, calm, with that same thick mountain accent I'd heard from some of the old-timers who'd lived here their whole lives. Not shouting, just speaking in a normal conversational tone, like he was counting items on a list. 2, 3, 4. I grabbed my flashlight and swept the beam across the clearing. Nothing, just trees and shadows and those damn stone piles. 5, 6, 7. Hello. I called out. This is Forest Service. Identify yourself. The counting didn't stop, didn't even pause. 8, 9, 10. I stood up, my hand moving to the bear spray on my belt. Sir, you need to respond. This is a ranger. Come into the light where I can see you. 11, 12, 13. The voice was moving. Not walking, exactly, but shifting position. One moment it came from my left, the next from behind me, then from the right. But there were no footsteps, no sounds of anyone moving through the brush. 14, 15, 16. I'm not ashamed to admit I was scared. This wasn't right, wasn't natural. But I'm also a professional, and I've dealt with plenty of weird situations in the backcountry. Drunk hikers, people having mental health crises, even a few folks trying to scare other campers as a prank. I kept my flashlight moving, kept watching for any sign of movement. 17, 18, 19. That's when I noticed the stone piles. They were glowing. Not brightly, just a faint luminescence, like they'd absorbed sunlight and were releasing it slowly. Blue-white light, cold and phosphorescent, pulsing gently in time with the counting. 20, 21, 22. What do you want? I shouted into the darkness. My voice sounded thin and scared even to my own ears. 23, 24, 25. The light from the stones was getting brighter. I could see now that they weren't just glowing randomly. Each pile lit up in sequence as the voice counted, creating a pattern, a wave of light moving around the circle. And with each number, the voice got closer. 26, 27, 28. I could hear breathing now, slow and steady, keeping pace with the counting. The sound of it made my skin crawl because it wasn't coming from any one direction. It was everywhere at once, surrounding me, like the forest itself was breathing. 29, 30, 31. I don't know what made me do it. Instinct, maybe, or just pure panic. But as the voice said 32, I reached down, grabbed one of the nearest stone piles, and kicked it apart. The rocks scattered across the clearing, the careful stack destroyed. The counting stopped. For maybe 5 seconds, there was absolute silence. No wind, no animals, no breathing. Just dead, suffocating quiet that pressed against my eardrums like I was deep underwater. And then the voice spoke again, but this time it wasn't counting. This time it sounded angry. 32. The pile I destroyed began to rebuild itself. I'm not talking about someone in the darkness putting it back together. I mean the stones moved on their own, rolling across the ground, lifting into the air, stacking themselves with that same precise geometry. In less than 30 seconds, the pile was complete again, exactly as it had been. 33. Another pile lit up, brighter than before. 34. I ran, grabbed my pack, left my fire burning, and ran for the trail. Behind me, the voice continued counting, and the stone piles grew brighter, bright enough now that they lit up the entire clearing like daylight. 35. 36. I was maybe 50 yards down the trail when I heard it reach 37. And then, after a pause that seemed to stretch for an eternity, it started over. 1. But this time there were multiple voices. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, all counting in perfect unison. Men and women and children, old voices and young, all speaking that same steady cadence. 2, 3, 4. I didn't stop running until I reached my truck, nearly 5 miles of stumbling and falling down that trail in the darkness. I had my headlamp, but I barely used it, too afraid that the light would show me something following behind. The voices faded as I got farther away, but I could still hear them echoing through the mountains. When I finally reached the trailhead, it was almost 3 a.m. I sat in my truck shaking, unable to make my hands steady enough to get the keys in the ignition. I must have sat there for 20 minutes before I could drive. I called in sick the next day, told Mike I had food poisoning, needed a couple days to recover. He bought it, told me to rest up. I spent those days researching, digging through old records and local history, trying to find some explanation for what I'd experienced. What I found didn't make me feel better. Standing Indian Mountain gets its name from a Cherokee legend. According to the story, the tribe once sent a warrior to stand on the summit and watch for approaching enemies. He was turned to stone as punishment for abandoning his post. But that's the sanitized version, the one they tell tourists. The original story, the one I found in a collection of Appalachian folklore from the 1930s, was different. The warrior wasn't punished for abandoning his post. He was sacrificed. The tribe was under attack, and their medicine men said the only way to save the village was to offer someone to the mountain. They chose their best warrior, took him to the summit, and made him stand in the center of a circle of stones while they chanted and counted, binding his spirit to the mountain to keep watch forever. The text said the ritual required 37 stones, one for each year of the warrior's life, and the counting had to be done perfectly, without error, or the binding wouldn't hold and the spirit would be free to seek revenge. I found another reference in a ranger report from 1987. A hiker had been found dead near Standing Indian Shelter, no obvious cause of death, but he'd apparently spent his last hours frantically destroying rock piles in the clearing. The autopsy showed he'd died of cardiac arrest, but witnesses said his face was frozen in an expression of absolute terror. There were other incidents too, scattered through the decades. Hikers who heard voices counting, rangers who reported seeing stones move on their own, people who spent a night at the shelter and came down the mountain changed, refusing to ever go back into the mountains again. I went back to Standing Indian a week later. I had to. It's my job, and I couldn't let fear keep me from doing it. But I went during the day, and I brought another ranger with me, Tom, a guy who'd worked in these mountains for 20 years. The stone piles were still there, still arranged in a perfect circle, still 37 stones each. Tom walked right past them without comment, started his inspection of the shelter like it was any other day. I realized he couldn't see them. Or maybe he could see them, but his brain just filtered them out as normal background scenery. Nothing worth noting. I didn't touch the stones this time. Just checked the shelter, verified the logbook, and got out of there. The logbook had a new entry, dated 2 days after my encounter. The counting woke me up at midnight. I counted with them, all the way to 37. Then they stopped, and everything was quiet. I think they just wanted someone to count with them. I think they're lonely. That entry scared me more than anything else I'd seen, because it suggested that whatever was doing the counting could affect people's minds, make them want to participate in the ritual. Or maybe, and this thought kept me up at night, maybe the counting was contagious. Once you heard it, really heard it, you became part of it. I've been having dreams lately. In them, I'm standing in the clearing at Standing Indian, and I'm counting. 1, 2, 3, all the way up to 37, and then starting over. There are others with me, translucent figures arranged in a circle around the stone piles. They're all counting too, their voices blending with mine. And the terrible thing is, in the dreams, I don't want to stop. The counting is soothing, meditative, purposeful. It feels important, like by counting I'm holding something back, keeping some ancient agreement intact. I wake up with my lips moving, forming numbers. Sometimes I find myself counting things during the day without realizing it. Steps to my truck, files on my desk, trees along the trail, and I always stop at 37. Always. Last week, I requested a transfer to a different forest. Told my supervisor I wanted a change of scenery, new challenges. He seemed surprised but approved it. I'll be starting at a forest in Virginia next month, hundreds of miles away from Standing Indian Mountain. But I don't think distance is going to help. Because 3 nights ago, I woke up at 11:47 p.m. to the sound of someone counting. I live in an apartment in town, nowhere near any hiking trails. But I could hear it clearly, that same calm male voice, counting slowly and steadily. 1, 2, 3. I went to the window. Down in the parking lot, barely visible in the streetlights, I could see them. Piles of stones, arranged in a circle, exactly 37 stones each. 4, 5, 6. I've stopped going to the window when I hear it. I just lie in bed, pillow over my head, trying to drown it out. But it doesn't help. The counting gets into your head, burrows deep into your thoughts until you can't remember what it was like before you heard it. 7, 8, 9. Sometimes I catch myself counting along, my lips moving in the darkness, keeping pace with that relentless voice. And part of me, a part that grows a little larger each night, wants to go down to the parking lot, wants to stand in that circle of stones and count properly, the way it's supposed to be done. Because I'm starting to understand what that logbook entry meant. They are lonely. Whatever bound that warrior's spirit to the mountain all those centuries ago, it's still there, still holding him in place. And all he can do is count, over and over, fulfilling an obligation that has no end. No wonder he's trying to share it, trying to get others to count with him. Maybe if enough people count, if enough voices join the chorus, he'll finally be released. Or maybe we'll all just be trapped there with him, counting for eternity. I don't know which possibility scares me more. The counting is getting louder. Every night it's a little clearer, a little closer. I'm writing this because I need people to know what happened, need there to be some record before I do whatever it is I'm going to do. Because I know now that eventually, probably soon, I'm going to go back to standing Indian Mountain. I'm going to stand in that circle of stones. And I'm going to count. 1, 2, 3. I can already feel the words forming on my tongue. 4, 5, 6. It wants me there. Needs me there. 7, 8, 9. And God help me, I want to go. If you're reading this and you hike in the Pisgah National Forest, stay away from standing Indian shelter. Don't camp there. Don't even approach it. And if you're on the trail and you see piles of stones arranged in a circle, don't count them. Don't even look at them too closely. Just keep walking. And whatever you do, if you hear someone counting in the darkness, don't count with them. Don't listen. Don't engage. Because once you really start counting, I don't think you can ever stop. 35, 36, 37, 1, 04. The missing day. My name is Julie Hartman, and I need to tell you about the 6 days I don't remember. 6 days that, according to everyone else, I lived through completely normally. 6 days that, according to my body, my camera, and the physical evidence, definitely happened. But according to my memory, I left on a Tuesday morning for a routine 2-day patrol and came back Tuesday afternoon, maybe 3 hours later. I've been a ranger in the Cherokee National Forest for 9 years. I'm 31 years old. I have a master's degree in forestry, and before this happened, I would have told you I was one of the most level-headed, practical people you'd ever meet. My supervisor calls me unflappable. My ex-boyfriend used to complain that I was too logical, too unwilling to believe in anything I couldn't prove. I guess he'd have a field day with this. It was early October, peak fall color season, and I'd been assigned to do a conditions assessment of the backcountry sites in the Sitico Creek Wilderness area. Nothing unusual. I'd done the same route probably 20 times before. 2 days out, 2 days back, checking on campsites, trail conditions, wildlife activity, the usual stuff. I'd done it so many times I could practically hike it in my sleep. I left the ranger station Tuesday morning at 7 a.m. I remember that clearly. I remember Dave, my supervisor, going over the route with me even though we both knew I didn't need the briefing. I remember loading my pack into my truck, the weight of it familiar and comfortable. I remember the drive to the trailhead, singing along badly to the radio. I remember signing in at the trail register, noting the time, 8:23 a.m., October 10th. And then I remember getting back to my truck at 11:47 a.m. the same day. That's it. No gap that I noticed, no sense of lost time, nothing. One moment I was starting up the trail, the next I was back at my truck, feeling good, thinking I'd made excellent time on what should have been a routine start to a 2-day patrol. I was congratulating myself on my conditioning, actually, thinking maybe I'd pushed harder than I'd realized and covered more ground than expected. My pack felt heavier than it should have, but I figured I was just tired. I drove back to the station, humming along to the same radio station, pulled in at 12:30 p.m., and walked into Dave's office to give him a quick update before breaking for lunch. The look on his face stopped me cold. "Julie," he said, standing up so fast his chair rolled backward. "What the hell are you doing here?" I work here." I tried to joke, but something in his expression killed the humor. "I just got back from starting the Sitico Creek assessment. Wanted to check in before I grabbed lunch." "You just got back?" he repeated slowly. "From starting the assessment." "Yeah, left this morning, remember? You went over the route with me." "Dave, are you feeling okay?" He walked around his desk, studying me like I was something he'd never seen before. "Julie, you left 6 days ago. It's Monday, October 16th. We've had search and rescue looking for you for the last 3 days." I laughed. It was such an absurd thing to say that laughing was the only response that made sense. "Nice try, but that's not funny. It's Tuesday the 10th. I left this morning. Look at your phone." I pulled it out, still smiling, ready to prove him wrong. The smile died when I saw the date. Monday, October 16th, 2:47 p.m. 47 missed calls, 32 text messages, multiple voicemails from Dave, from other rangers, from numbers I didn't recognize. "That's not possible," I whispered. "My phone must be glitched. The date is wrong." Dave took the phone gently from my hands and showed me his own. Same date. He turned on his computer monitor. Same date. He walked me to the wall calendar. Someone had been crossing off the days, and 6 of them were marked off after October 10th. "Julie, where have you been? Are you hurt? What happened out there?" "Nothing happened," I said, and I could hear the edge of hysteria in my voice. "Nothing happened because I just left this morning." "Dave, this isn't funny anymore. Whatever prank this is, it's not a prank." His voice was gentle but firm. "You've been gone for 6 days. You missed your check-in on Wednesday. When you didn't respond to radio calls or return by Thursday, we initiated a search. We've had teams combing the Citico Creek area for 3 days. The only reason we didn't expand it to a full recovery operation is because..." He hesitated. "Because what?" "Because we kept finding evidence that you were okay. Footprints, places where someone had camped, signs that you were moving through the area systematically like you were doing your job. We even found one of your trail markers at the Henderson Ridge site, dated Friday. But we never found you. It was like you were always one step ahead of the search teams." I sat down heavily in the nearest chair. This wasn't possible. Time didn't just skip forward. People didn't lose 6 days. But the evidence was right there, undeniable and impossible to rationalize away. "I need to check my pack," I said suddenly. "My camera. I document everything on my patrols. If I really was out there for 6 days, there will be photos." We went out to my truck. My pack was there, and when I lifted it, I understood why it had felt so heavy. It was still fully loaded, but now the food I'd packed was mostly gone. The water bottles were empty. My spare socks were dirty and worn. And my camera bag, which should have been near the top of the pack, was buried at the bottom under everything else, like I'd been digging through the pack repeatedly over several days. My hands were shaking as I pulled out the camera and turned it on. The battery was at 12%, even though I'd started with a full charge. And when I pulled up the photos, my stomach dropped. 4,372 photos. All of the same tree, not similar trees. The exact same tree, a massive old oak with a distinctive lightning scar down one side, photographed from every conceivable angle. Close-ups of the bark, wide shots showing the full canopy, detail shots of individual leaves. Photos taken at different times of day based on the lighting. Dawn, midday, sunset, even night shots with my flash, showing that gnarled trunk in harsh white light. I scrolled through them, my breath coming faster. Photo after photo after photo of the same tree. For 1,000 images of bark and branches and leaves. And in some of them, in the background or reflected in the bark's texture, I could see myself. A figure in a ranger uniform, standing motionless, holding a camera. "Jesus Christ," Dave breathed, looking over my shoulder. "Julie, what were you doing out there?" "I don't know," I said, and it was the truth. I don't remember any of this. We called in a doctor. She did a full neurological exam, asked me questions about my memory, my mental state, checked my pupils and reflexes. Physically, I was fine. A little dehydrated, some blisters on my feet that I didn't remember getting, minor scratches and bruises consistent with hiking through rough terrain. But nothing that explained 6 missing days. "It could be dissociative fugue," she said carefully. "A rare psychological condition where someone loses track of time and their identity, continues functioning but doesn't form memories. Usually triggered by severe stress or trauma. Have you been under unusual pressure lately?" I shook my head. Work was fine. My personal life was boring but stable. I had no history of mental illness. There was no reason for something like that to happen. "I want to run some blood tests, check for toxins or substances that might explain this. In the meantime, I'm recommending a psychiatric evaluation and a follow-up MRI. We need to rule out anything neurological." The blood tests came back clean. The MRI showed nothing abnormal. The psychiatrist, after 3 sessions, admitted he was stumped. I was showing no signs of psychosis, no indication of dissociative disorders, no red flags that would explain what happened. But my body told a different story. My hiking boots, which had been relatively new, were worn through in the soles. The treads were completely smooth in places, worn down in a pattern that suggested I'd been walking in circles. Hours and hours of repetitive walking, wearing down the same spots over and over. There were also marks on my hands that I hadn't noticed initially. Small cuts on my palms and fingers, the kind you get from handling rough bark repeatedly. And under my fingernails, when I finally thought to look, was residue that matched the bark of white oak trees. I'd been touching that tree for days, apparently, photographing it and touching it and walking around it in circles until I wore holes in my boots. The question that kept me awake at night was why. What about that tree had captured my attention so completely that I'd spent 6 days documenting it? And why couldn't I remember any of it? Dave put me on administrative leave pending a full psychological evaluation. It was presented as a kindness, giving me time to recover from whatever I'd experienced, but I could see the worry in his eyes. He was afraid I'd had some kind of mental breakdown. Hell, I was afraid of that too, but I couldn't let it go. I needed to understand what had happened to me. So 2 weeks after my return, despite everyone's advice, I went back to Citico Creek. I told my roommate where I was going, set up a check-in schedule with hourly text messages, and hiked back into the wilderness to find that tree. It took me most of the day. The area I'd been assigned to cover was extensive, and I had no clear memory of where I'd been. But I had those 4,000 photos, and by studying them carefully, I could identify landmarks in the background. A distinctive rock formation here, a peculiar bend in the creek there. I triangulated, and eventually I found it. The tree stood in a small clearing about a quarter mile off the main trail. It was massive, easily 300 years old, with that characteristic lightning scar running down its trunk like a jagged white seam. The ground around it was packed hard, worn bare of vegetation in a circular pattern about 20 feet in diameter. My boot prints were still visible in the dirt, hundreds of them, overlapping and circling the tree in an endless loop. I approached slowly, my phone in my hand, ready to call for help if I felt anything strange. But there was nothing. Just a tree, old and scarred and unremarkable except for its size. I touched the bark where my photos showed I'd touched it before, and it felt like tree bark. Rough, cool, solid. Normal. I took a few photos, more out of habit than anything else, and was about to leave when I noticed something carved into the bark on the side facing away from the trail. Words cut deep into the wood, the edges of the carving weathered enough to suggest it had been there for years. Don't look up. My eyes went to the canopy automatically, an involuntary response to being told not to do something. And that's when I saw them. Faces, dozens of them, maybe hundreds, carved into the branches high up in the tree. Not crude carvings, but detailed work. Each face unique and individual and twisted in an expression of absolute concentration. They were all looking down, all focused on the base of the tree where I stood. And they were all wearing ranger hats. I stumbled backward, my breath catching in my throat. The faces weren't just random carvings. They were portraits, specific people, rendered in wood with unsettling accuracy. And as I studied them, backing away slowly, I realized I recognized some of them. Faces from old photographs at the ranger station, rangers who'd worked in this forest decades ago. Rangers who'd disappeared or died under mysterious circumstances. There, on a branch about 30 feet up, was a face I recognized from a memorial plaque in our break room. James Morrison, lost in 1987 while on a solo patrol, never found. And next to him, barely visible in the shadows, was Sarah Chun, who'd vanished in 2003. And others, faces I'd seen in old group photos, rangers whose names I'd heard in stories but never met. And then I saw my own face, fresh carved, the wood still light where it had been cut recently, my features rendered in perfect detail. My face, staring down at the spot where I'd stood for 6 days, my carved eyes wide and unblinking. I ran, just turned and ran, crashing through the underbrush, my heart hammering so hard I thought it would burst. I didn't stop until I reached the main trail, and then I kept going, practically sprinting the 5 miles back to the trailhead. I was in my truck, engine running, before I dared to look at my phone. 12 text messages, all from my roommate, asking if I was okay. The last one said, "Julie, you were supposed to check in an hour ago. I'm calling the rangers if I don't hear from you in 10 minutes. An hour ago? I looked at the timestamp on my first message, the one I'd sent when I reached the tree. 3 hours had passed. 3 hours that felt like 30 minutes. I texted back immediately, told her I was fine, signal had been bad. Then I looked at my camera. 247 new photos. All of that tree. All taken from the same spot, the same angle, showing that carved warning and those faces in the branches. I didn't remember taking any of them. The last photo was different. It was taken from above, looking straight down at the base of the tree. Looking down at me, standing in that worn circle, my face tilted up, my mouth open like I was counting or chanting or speaking words I couldn't remember. I couldn't have taken that photo. I was on the ground the entire time. But there it was, clear as day, shot from at least 30 feet up in the branches. I went straight to Dave's office. Showed him everything, the photos, the carving, the faces in the tree. I expected skepticism or concern for my mental health, but instead he just looked tired. "I was hoping you wouldn't find it," he said quietly. "That tree, we've known about it for a long time. Every forest has places like that, spots where things don't work right. We're supposed to keep people away from them, but we can't exactly put up signs saying, 'Warning, temporal anomaly,' or 'Danger, tree that steals time.'" "You knew?" I couldn't keep the anger out of my voice. "You knew there was something wrong out there, and you let me patrol that area?" "The patrol route doesn't go near that tree. You have to deliberately leave the trail to find it. Most rangers never see it. Those who do," he paused, choosing his words carefully, "most just feel uneasy and move on. A few get drawn to it, spend some time there, usually minutes or hours. You're the first in 20 years to lose days." "What is it? What's happening there?" "We don't know exactly. The Cherokee had stories about it. Said it was a place where time pools like water, where the mountain remembers everyone who's ever stood there. They wouldn't go near it. The early rangers, back in the 30s, they thought it was just superstition until people started disappearing. After James Morrison in '87, we started keeping better records. 14 rangers have vanished near that tree. 6 came back, like you did, with missing time and no memories. The others." He didn't need to finish. "The faces in the branches," I said. "Are those the ones who didn't come back?" "We think so, but we've never found bodies, never found any evidence of foul play. They just stayed, became part of the tree, part of the mountain, part of whatever that place is." I looked down at my camera, at that impossible photo taken from above. "Why don't I remember? Where did those 6 days go?" "Maybe you do remember," Dave said softly. "Maybe those memories are just stored somewhere you can't access. Maybe they're in the tree now, carved into the wood like all the others. Maybe that's what it does, collects moments and memories, stores them in its branches like fruit." I wanted to dismiss it as crazy talk, but I couldn't. I'd seen my face carved in that tree. I'd lost 6 days to it. And somewhere, in whatever passes for consciousness in an ancient oak tree, I had memories I couldn't access. Memories of standing in a circle, touching bark, taking thousands of photos, slowly wearing holes in my boots as I walked the same path over and over, trapped in a loop I couldn't escape from. The worst part is, I want to go back. Even knowing what's there, even understanding the danger, I feel drawn to it. Sometimes I dream about that tree, about standing in its shadow, about the feeling of bark under my hands. And in the dreams I'm not scared. I'm peaceful, calm, like I'm finally where I belong. I requested a transfer to a different forest. It was approved immediately. I start in Tennessee next month, far from Citico Creek and that tree and those carved faces. But I don't think distance will help because the pull is getting stronger, not weaker. 3 nights ago, I woke up to find myself dressed in my ranger uniform, my boots on, my keys in my hand. I was standing at my front door, ready to leave. I don't remember getting up, don't remember getting dressed. But my truck was warm when I checked it the next morning, like the engine had been running recently. I'm losing time again. Minutes here and there, hours occasionally. And when I look at my phone's photo gallery, there are new pictures. Not thousands like before, just a few. But they're all of trees. Different trees, trees I don't remember photographing, but all of them have one thing in common. When I zoom in on the branches, I can see faces. And one of them is always mine. I don't know what's happening to me. I don't know if I'm slowly being pulled back to that place, or if the place is somehow spreading, manifesting in other trees, other forests, claiming more space. Maybe time doesn't work the way we think it does in these old mountains. Maybe there are places where moments pool and collect, where the boundary between now and then becomes porous, and stepping into them means becoming unstuck from the normal flow of cause and effect. Or maybe I'm just going crazy. Maybe I had a breakdown in those woods, and everything since has been my mind trying to make sense of trauma it can't fully process. That would be easier to accept, honestly. Madness is at least something we understand, something that can be treated. But when I look at my hands, at those small scars from handling bark, at the wear pattern on my boots that suggests endless circling, I know it's real. Whatever happened to me in those 6 days, whatever is still happening to me, it's not in my head. It's in the trees, in the mountains, in the old places where time doesn't run straight. I'm writing this because I need someone to know. If I disappear again, if I lose more time and don't come back, this document will be found on my laptop. Someone will read it and maybe, just maybe, they'll understand what happened. Or maybe they'll find me someday, standing in a circle around a tree somewhere, taking pictures of bark for reasons I can't explain, slowly wearing away until there's nothing left but a face carved in the branches, looking down at whoever comes next. The pull is getting stronger. I can feel it now, even sitting here in my apartment, safe and far from any forest. The trees are calling. The mountain remembers me. And sooner or later, I think I'm going to answer. If you're a ranger reading this, if you work in any of the old forests in these mountains, be careful where you wander. Stay on the marked trails. Don't investigate things that seem off or strange. And if you find yourself taking pictures of the same tree over and over, if you feel time slipping away like water through your fingers, run. Run fast and don't look back. Because once the mountain remembers you, I don't think it ever lets. Story 05, The Fire on Bald Mountain. I'm writing this in the station logbook because it needs to be documented officially, even if no one believes it. Even if they think I've lost my mind, which I'm starting to wonder about myself. My name is Rob Keaton. I'm 47 years old, and I've been a ranger at the Nantahala National Forest for 19 years. In all that time, I've seen a lot of strange things, explained away most of them, and learned to live with the few I couldn't. But what I witnessed last night on Gregory Bald has shaken me to my core. Every ranger in this part of the Appalachians knows the stories about Gregory Bald. Hell, most of the old-timers in the surrounding towns know them too. Every 7 years, on the night of October 23rd, people report seeing a massive fire on the summit. Not a forest fire, nothing that spreads or causes damage, just a localized blaze visible for miles around, burning bright enough to light up the night sky. And by morning, there's never any evidence that a fire occurred at all. No burned scars, no ash, no scorched earth. Just the bald as it always is, covered in grass and wildflowers, untouched. I'd heard the stories when I first started, of course. Every new ranger gets to talk about local legends and how to handle hikers who come in with wild stories. Gregory Bald's phantom fire was always presented as mass hallucination or atmospheric phenomena, light refracting off the mountain in unusual ways, maybe some kind of natural gas emission that could ignite under the right conditions. Rational explanations for what people thought they saw. The thing is, the reports are consistent. Too consistent. Every 7 years like clockwork, the last occurrence being 2017, then 2010 before that, going back in documented reports to at least 1948, and probably much further than that if you count oral histories. The Cherokee used to call it the mountain's memory and wouldn't go near the bald on those nights. This year, October 23rd fell on a Tuesday. I'd marked it on my calendar months ago, half joking with myself that maybe I'd finally solved the mystery. But as the date got closer, I found myself taking it more seriously. 19 years I'd worked here, and I'd never been on duty during one of the 7-year cycles. This was my chance to see it firsthand, to document whatever was really happening up there. I cleared it with my supervisor, told him I wanted to do an overnight observation, scientific curiosity, and all that. He gave me this look I couldn't quite read, something between concern and resignation, and approved it without argument. In hindsight, I think he knew something I didn't. I think he'd been through this before. I hiked up to Gregory Bald on the afternoon of the 23rd, taking the standard trail from Parson Branch Road. It's about a 5-mile hike, not too difficult, rising through thick forest before opening up onto the Bald summit. The weather was clear and cold, perfect visibility, No chance of atmospheric distortion or any of the other rational explanations I'd been banking on. The bald itself is about 15 acres of open grassland sitting on top of the mountain, surrounded on all sides by dense forest. It's a beautiful spot, popular with hikers for the views and the azalea blooms in spring. On a clear day, you can see for 100 miles in every direction. It's also completely isolated. The nearest trail shelter is 3 miles away, and there's no cell service up there. Just you and the mountain. I set up camp about 50 yards from the center of the bald, right at the edge of the tree line. I wanted a clear view of the entire open area while still having some cover. I had my two-way radio, though I wasn't expecting it to work well with all the interference from the terrain. I had my camera with a full battery and extra memory cards. I had my temperature gun, my handheld weather station, my GPS, every piece of equipment I could think of that might help document whatever happened. And then I waited. Sunset came and went, painting the sky in shades of orange and red that seemed almost prophetic. I made dinner on my camp stove, drank some coffee, and settled in to watch. The temperature dropped steadily as full darkness fell, down to about 40 degrees. The stars came out, brilliant and clear in the absence of any light pollution. It was beautiful and peaceful and completely normal. Until 11:43 p.m. That's when I felt it. Not heard it, felt it. A vibration in the ground, subtle at first, like a distant truck passing on a highway. But there was no highway within 20 miles, and the vibration was getting stronger. I stood up, my hand instinctively going to my radio, and watched as the grass in the center of the bald began to move. Not from wind. There was no wind. The grass was moving on its own, rippling outward from a central point like something was pushing up from underneath. And then the ground began to glow. I'm not talking about reflected light or bioluminescence or anything that could be explained by natural phenomena. The earth itself was glowing, a deep orange red that looked like molten rock, spreading out from that central point in a perfect circle, maybe 30 feet in diameter. The temperature on my weather station started climbing rapidly. 50 degrees, 60, 70, and then the fire started. It didn't ignite like a normal fire, didn't spread from a spark or grow gradually. It just appeared, fully formed, roaring up from the ground in a column of flame at least 40 feet high. The heat of it hit me like a physical force even from 50 yards away, hot enough that I had to shield my face with my arm. My camera was recording, my weather station was going crazy, the temperature reading climbing past 200 degrees. But the fire wasn't spreading. It stayed contained in that circle, burning with an intensity that should have consumed every bit of vegetation, that should have scorched the earth black and sent smoke visible for miles. Yet the grass at the edge of the circle wasn't even singed. The flames stopped at a precise boundary, like they were contained by an invisible wall. I don't know how long I stood there, frozen between terror and fascination. Could have been seconds, could have been minutes. Time felt strange, like it was moving at the wrong speed. And then I saw the shapes in the fire. People. There were people in the flames. Not burning, not screaming, just standing there in the heart of the inferno like it was the most natural thing in the world. I could see them clearly, dozens of figures, translucent and wavering, but definitely human-shaped. They were arranged in a circle facing inward, and they appeared to be doing something, some kind of coordinated movement. Dancing maybe, or working, or conducting some kind of ritual. I grabbed my camera, zoomed in as far as it would go. Through the viewfinder, the figures became clearer. They were dressed in old-style clothing, homespun fabrics and simple cuts that looked like they belonged to another century. Some were Native American, others looked like early European settlers. They moved with purpose, their actions synchronized, like they were building something or performing a ceremony that required precise coordination. And at the center of their circle, I could see what they were working on. A structure, partially formed, made of what looked like stone and wood. It was hard to make out the details through the flames, but it looked like a cabin or small building, rising up from the ground as they worked. My weather station was reading 400 degrees now. 500. Numbers that should have turned everything around me to ash. But I felt only warmth, like standing near a campfire on a cold night. The fire wasn't behaving like real fire. It was something else, something that only looked like flames. That's when my radio crackled to life. Static at first, then voices. Multiple voices talking over each other, some speaking English, others in languages I didn't recognize. The words were garbled and distant, but I caught fragments. Foundation needs to be deeper. The boundary stones aren't aligned. We don't have much time before. The voices faded in and out, sometimes clear enough to understand, sometimes just noise. But they were all discussing construction, talking about building something, coordinating their efforts. And as I listened, I realized I was hearing both sides of the fire. Some voices were speaking to me from the present, from where I stood watching. Others were coming from inside the flames, from whatever time or place those figures inhabited. I don't know what possessed me to do it, maybe curiosity, maybe stupidity, but I started walking toward the fire. Not right up to it, but closer, near enough that the heat should have been unbearable. And as I got closer, the voices on the radio got clearer, and I started to hear something else. Singing. A low rhythmic chant that seemed to come from the earth itself. The figures in the flames turned to look at me. All of them, in perfect unison, their heads swiveling toward where I stood at the edge of their circle. And I realized they could see me just as clearly as I could see them. We were looking at each other across whatever barriers separated their time from mine. One of them stepped forward, an older man with a weathered face and clothing that suggested he was Cherokee. He raised his hand, not in greeting but in warning, and pointed past me toward the tree line. I turned to look, and that's when I saw the others. More figures, but these were on my side of the fire, standing in the shadows at the edge of the forest. Solid and real and definitely present in my time. There were maybe 20 of them, all wearing ranger uniforms from different eras. I recognized some of the uniform styles from old photographs at the station. 1950s, 1960s, 1970s, even what looked like the original Forest Service uniforms from the 1930s. They were all watching the fire with expressions I couldn't read. Not fear, not wonder, something else. Recognition maybe. Resignation. Like they'd seen this before, lived through this before, and knew exactly what it meant. The oldest of them, a man in a vintage uniform that had to be from the 40s, noticed me watching and walked over. He moved normally, not floating or translucent like the figures in the flames, but there was something off about him. It took me a moment to realize what it was. He cast no shadow, even with the bright fire illuminating everything around us. "First time?" he asked, his voice quiet and sad. I couldn't speak, just nodded. "It gets easier," he said. "Knowing what you're seeing doesn't make it less disturbing, but easier to accept." He gestured toward the fire. "They're building something. Have been for about 300 years, near as we can figure. Every 7 years they get another night to work on it. Rest of the time, it exists somewhere else. Somewhere we can't see." "What is it?" I finally managed to ask. "What are they building?" "A door, we think. Or maybe a bridge. Something that connects here to there, then to now, the living to the dead. The Cherokee who lived here understood it better than we do. They used to maintain it, keep it balanced. When they were forced out, when we took over these mountains, the balance shifted. Now it just burns on its own schedule, and all we can do is watch." "Who are you?" I asked, though I think I already knew the answer. "Rangers who stayed," he said simply. "Every 7 years, some of us come back to witness, to remember, to make sure someone knows what's really happening up here." He looked at me with those shadowless eyes. "You'll come back too, next time. 7 years from now, you'll feel the pull. Won't be able to resist it. And the time after that, and the time after that, until eventually you don't leave at all." "That's insane," I said, but my voice lacked conviction. "Is it?" He gestured to my equipment. My camera is still recording, my weather station reading temperatures that shouldn't be possible. "How are you going to explain this? The video you're recording won't show what you're seeing, cameras never do. Just looks like heat shimmer and light distortion. Your temperature readings will seem like equipment malfunction. And if you tell anyone what you really saw, what do you think happens to your career?" He was right. I knew he was right even as he said it. I could feel the weight of that knowledge settling on me like a physical thing. "How long?" I asked. "How long have you been coming back?" "Since 1947, he said. 77 years. Seen it 11 times now. Each time I understand a little more and wish I understood a little less." The fire was starting to dim. I checked my watch, shocked to see it was nearly 4 a.m. Hours had passed, hours that felt like minutes. The figures in the flames were finishing their work, the structure at the center of their circle nearly complete now. I still couldn't make out exactly what it was. The angles were wrong. The geometry didn't quite make sense to my eyes, but it was definitely something purposeful and designed. As the flames died down, the singing grew louder, reaching a crescendo that seemed to shake the air itself. The rangers around me, the shadowless witnesses from other decades, stood at attention, their hands over their hearts in some kind of salute or respect. I found myself doing the same, though I couldn't have explained why. And then, just before the fire went out completely, I saw it clearly for the first time. The structure they'd been building. It wasn't a cabin or a building. It was a doorway, freestanding, made of stone and wood and something else that looked like solidified light. And through that doorway, I could see somewhere else. Not another place in our world, but another world entirely. A forest that was and wasn't the Appalachians, mountains that rose higher than any I'd ever seen, a sky that held stars in patterns I didn't recognize. The figures walked through, one by one, passing from the flames into that other place. The Cherokee man who'd warned me went last, pausing at the threshold to look back. He nodded once, a gesture that seemed to carry meaning I couldn't quite grasp, and then he was gone. The fire went out. The doorway collapsed in on itself, or maybe it just returned to wherever it existed the rest of the time. The temperature dropped instantly, my weather station reading 42 degrees like nothing had happened. The grass where the fire had been was untouched, not even warm when I walked over and placed my hand on it. The other rangers were gone, just vanished, like they'd never been there. But I could still smell wood smoke and old wool, could still feel the heat of that impossible fire on my face. I packed up my gear as dawn broke, my hands shaking so badly I could barely manage the buckles and straps. My camera had 6 hours of footage. I watched some of it on the small preview screen. Just like the ranger had said, it showed nothing but heat distortion and light anomalies. You couldn't see the figures, couldn't see the doorway, couldn't see anything that would prove what I'd witnessed. The hike down felt surreal, like I was walking through a dream or someone else's memory. When I got back to the station, it was just after 8 a.m. My supervisor was already there, coffee in hand, waiting. "Well," he asked. I told him everything. Expected skepticism or concern, but he just listened quietly, nodding occasionally like I was confirming things he already knew. "How many times have you seen it?" I asked when I finished. "Twice," he said. 1996 and 2003. Missed the 2010 occurrence. Was stationed in Colorado. Came back for 2017, but I watched from a distance that time. Didn't talk to the others, didn't get close. Figured I'd learned enough. And you never told anyone? Who would believe it? And more importantly, what would telling accomplish? The fire isn't hurting anyone. Whatever they're building has been in progress for centuries and might take centuries more. The mountain keeps its secrets, and we keep ours. That's how it works here. The ranger I talked to, the one from 1947, he said I'd come back, that I wouldn't be able to resist. My supervisor smiled, but it was a sad smile. "Yeah, you'll feel it 7 years from now. An pull you can't quite explain, a need to be on that mountain on that night. Most of us try to fight it the first time, convince ourselves we imagined everything, that it wasn't real. But you'll come back. They always do. And eventually, I'll become one of them, one of the ones who stays. Some do. Not all, but some. Seems to depend on how many times you witness it, how deep you let yourself fall into the mystery. Me, I'm planning to retire in 5 years, move away from these mountains entirely. Maybe that'll break the connection, maybe it won't. Won't know until 2031 rolls around, and I find out if I can resist the pull from 1,000 miles away. I've been trying to process everything for the past 2 weeks. I go about my regular duties, file my reports, interact with hikers, and handle the day-to-day business of being a ranger. But everything feels slightly unreal now, like I'm acting out a role while my real self is still standing on that bald, watching impossible fires and talking to ghosts. I've looked up the history of Gregory Bald, dug deeper than I ever had before. Found references to Cherokee ceremonies held there, to early settlers who reported spirit lights on the mountain, to mysterious disappearances over the centuries. Found a pattern of rangers assigned to this area who stayed longer than average, kept extending their tours, and eventually stopped leaving the mountains at all. Found photos from 1954, a group shot of rangers at a regional meeting. In the back row, barely visible, was the man I'd talked to, the one who said he'd been coming back since 1947. He looked exactly the same in that 70-year-old photograph as he had 2 weeks ago. I don't know what to do with this knowledge. Don't know if I should stay or go, if I should try to forget or lean into the mystery. Part of me wants to run as far from these mountains as I can. But another part, a part that's been growing stronger every day, wants to understand. Wants to know what they're building, why they're building it, what happens when it's finally complete. 7 years. That's how long I have before I'll face this again. Before I'll feel that pull to return to the bald on October 23rd and witness the next phase of construction. 7 years to decide if I'm going to fight it or surrender to it. I'm writing this down because it needs to be documented, even if no one believes it. Even if it just becomes another file in the back of some drawer, another crazy story from another ranger who spent too much time alone in the woods. Maybe the next person who reads this will be someone like me, someone who hiked up to Gregory Bald on the wrong night and saw things they can't explain. If that's you, if you're reading this because you witnessed the fire and you're trying to make sense of it, here's what I can tell you. You're not crazy. It's real. Whatever you saw, whatever you felt, it happened. And 7 years from now, you'll feel the need to go back. You'll tell yourself you won't, that you've moved on, that it was just some weird experience you had once. But when the date gets close, you'll feel it pulling at you, and you'll have to decide if you're going to answer. I don't know yet what I'll decide. Ask me in 7 years. Or better yet, come to Gregory Bald on October 23rd, 2031. I have a feeling I'll be there, standing at the edge of the tree line, watching impossible fires burn without consuming, witnessing the slow construction of a doorway to somewhere else. And maybe, if you're reading this because you saw it too, you'll be there with me. Another witness, another keeper of the mountain's secret, another ranger who learned that some fires burn in places the living can't fully understand, and that knowing this changes you in ways you can't predict or prevent. The mountain remembers. The fire returns. And those of us who witness it become part of something ancient and ongoing, whether we want to or not. 7 years until I find out if I can resist the pull. I'm not optimistic. Story 06. The locked room under our cabin. A real haunted home horror. I want to start this by saying, I've never been the kind of person who jumps to ghosts as an explanation. I grew up in a family that blamed everything on bad wiring, old plumbing, or some animal that got in somehow. We're mountain people, practical people. If you hear scratching, it's mice. If you hear footsteps, it's the house settling or your own heartbeat in your ears. You shrug it off and move on. I really wish I could still do that. A couple of summers ago, my younger sister and I decided to rent a cabin for a week in the Appalachian Mountains. We don't live too far from there, but we wanted a real break. No work, no traffic, no constant notifications. Just trees, hiking, and the kind of quiet you only get out in the middle of nowhere. We found the cabin on this small regional rental site, not one of the big ones. The pictures made it look cozy, wood paneling, stone fireplace, big porch overlooking the valley. The listing mentioned rustic charm and original root cellar in the basement, which I thought sounded kind of cool at the time. The owner, a woman named Mrs. Dowell, met us at the little general store in town so we could follow her truck up the mountain. She was older, with that wiry, ageless look some mountain folks have, and she spent most of the drive leaning out her window to point out landmarks we couldn't possibly remember. When we finally reached the cabin, the first thing that struck me was how alone it felt. It wasn't just no neighbors within sight alone. It was perched at the end of a narrow dirt road that essentially dead-ended into the forest. Trees pressed in close on 3 sides. The 4th side looked out over a steep drop into the valley. No other houses. No lights, just us and an ocean of trees. Inside, it was exactly like the photos, maybe a little dustier. The furniture was worn but clean, the kitchen tiny but functional, and there were old black and white family photos on the walls that I assumed were hers. Overall, it felt lived in, like somebody actually cared about the place, which made me feel better, until we went downstairs. The stairs to the basement were off the kitchen, narrow and steep like they always seem to be in older houses. I wouldn't have even gone down there that first day, but my sister, Jamie, wanted to know if there was a washer and dryer. I pulled the chain for the single bulb at the top of the stairs, and we started down. The basement was low-ceilinged, with stone walls and a concrete floor. It smelled like damp earth and something metallic, undercut by a faint, sour smell I couldn't place. There was an old washer and dryer against one wall, a workbench with some rusted tools, and a few boxes labeled things like Zmaz and canning jars. And on the far side of the basement was a door. It was small, shorter than a normal door, like it had been built for someone a little under 5 feet tall, and it was made of dark, rough wood. There was no knob, just a heavy iron latch and a thick padlock, newer than the door itself. The wood around the latch was worn smooth, like it had been opened and shut a lot, once upon a time. "That must be the old root cellar," Jamie said, leaning forward a bit. "Think we can open it?" Before I could answer, we heard Mrs. Dowell call from upstairs. "Girls, you all right down there?" I went back up, ducking slightly because the ceiling was low. "Yeah, we're fine. Just checking out the basement." She smiled, but her eyes flicked past me, toward the stairs. Good. You two just make yourself at home." Jamie called from below. "Hey, what's in the locked room back here?" Mrs. Dowell's smile vanished. Her face went strangely blank for a second, like a mask had slipped, and then she smoothed it back into place. "Oh, that old thing. Nothing you need to worry about. Just storage. We don't use it anymore." "Can we?" Jamie started. No, Mrs. Dowell's tone was sharper than I expected. It actually made me flinch. "That door stays locked. You leave it be, you hear?" Jamie and I traded a look. "Sure," I said quickly. She relaxed a fraction, but the friendliness didn't quite come back. "Basement's just for laundry. Everything else you need is upstairs. If anything acts up, you call me at the number I left on the fridge. And don't go wandering down the hill at night. Too easy to get turned around in those woods." She left not long after, and we spent the evening unpacking, cooking, and sitting on the porch as the sky went from blue to purple to that deep, endless mountain black. The night noises were louder than I was used to. Crickets, frogs, the occasional distant howl of a coyote, but nothing felt threatening. The weirdness didn't start until the second night. We'd gone hiking most of the day and were both sore and pleasantly exhausted. Around 10, we headed to our separate rooms. Mine was at the back of the cabin, Jamie's at the front. The house settled into that deep silence you only get in rural places, where there's no distant traffic or neighbors. I must have been asleep for a while when something woke me up. At first, I thought it was just the need to pee. The room was dark except for a faint rectangle of moonlight on the floor. I lay there for a second, listening to the wind, when I heard it. A soft, repetitive sound coming from below. At first, I thought it was pipes, or the washing machine cycling, but it was too irregular. A kind of faint thump, pause, scrape, pause. Thump, scrape, like something heavy shifting its weight, dragging across concrete. I held my breath. The sound grew a tiny bit louder, or maybe my brain just tuned into it more. It was definitely coming from the basement. I told myself it was probably the old house itself, expanding or contracting. I almost believed it. But then there was this very distinct noise, metal on metal, a dull, hollow rattle, like someone testing a padlock. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, every nerve in my body on high alert. When the sound finally stopped, I waited a good 15 minutes before I dared move. Eventually, exhaustion won out and I drifted back to sleep. In the morning, I almost convinced myself I'd dreamed it. I didn't mention it to Jamie, but that night, it happened again. This time, it started earlier, maybe around midnight. Same sequence. Thump, scrape, thump, scrape. Then, the soft clink of metal. This time, though, I heard something else mixed in with it. A low, rhythmic sound, almost like breathing or someone talking too quietly to make out the words. I finally worked up the courage to get out of bed and peek into the hallway. The cabin was dark and still. Jamie's door was closed, no light under it. I almost went to wake her up, just so I wouldn't be alone with the noise, but I didn't want her to think I was being dramatic. Instead, I went back to bed, pulled the blankets up to my chin like a little kid, and stared at the door until I fell asleep sometime near dawn. The third night is when things stopped being ignorable. We'd stayed up late watching movies and eating junk food, like teenagers at a sleepover. By the time we went to our rooms, it was past midnight. I was scrolling on my phone, not really tired yet, when I heard Jamie's door open. "Bathroom," I called softly, not wanting to startle her. She didn't answer. I heard her footsteps go past my room, heading toward the kitchen. The floorboards creaked in that specific way they do in old houses, and I could picture the route she was taking. I almost got up to ask if she wanted water, but I was comfortable and lazy, so I stayed put. A minute later, I heard the basement door open. I froze. The sound was unmistakable. The low groan of the hinges, the little bump when the door hit the wall, then the creak of the first step. "Jamie," I called louder this time. No response. I got out of bed quickly, heart hammering, and opened my door. The hallway was dark. I hurried through the living room to the kitchen, flicking on the overhead light as I went. The basement door was closed. I stood there, hand halfway outstretched, completely thrown. I was sure, absolutely sure, I'd heard it open. The footsteps, too. That creak pattern was burned into my brain enough that I could tell you where she was just by the sound. As I was standing there, trying to make sense of it, Jamie's bedroom door opened behind me. She squinted out into the light, hair a mess, blanket draped around her shoulders. "Why are you stomping around? It's like 2 in the morning." A cold, electric feeling went through me. You weren't in the kitchen just now." She frowned. "No, I was asleep. What's your problem?" I swallowed. "Nothing. I just thought I heard you." She rolled her eyes and shuffled to the bathroom. When she shut the door, I was left alone in the bright, too quiet kitchen, facing that closed basement door. I stood there for a long time, my mind running through possibilities. House noises, sleep hallucinations, my imagination. Then, from the other side of the floor, directly beneath my feet, came a slow, deliberate knock. 3 times. Heavy, spaced out. Not a pipe. Not the house settling. Someone, or something, knocking on the underside of the floor. I didn't go down there that night. I didn't even turn the basement light on. I just backed away, turned off the kitchen lights, and went to bed, where I lay awake until I could see the first hint of gray creeping into the sky. In the morning, I finally told Jamie everything. At first, she laughed. Then, when she saw I wasn't joking, her expression changed. "You're probably hearing critters," she said. "Raccoons or something. It's an old house, Kayla. Sound travels weird." "I know what raccoons sound like," I said. This sounded like someone trying to get out of that root cellar. She went quiet at that. "Look," she finally said. "We'll go down together. Check it out in the daytime. If there's anything off, we'll call the owner and leave early. Deal?" The idea of going down there made my stomach twist, but not knowing was worse. So I agreed. We waited until late morning, when sunlight was pouring through the small basement windows. We armed ourselves with a flashlight and a broom handle, just in case there really was some animal we had to shoo away, and headed down. The basement looked the same as before. Washer, dryer, workbench, boxes. And the door. Only this time, the padlock was on the floor. It lay there a foot in front of the door, snapped clean through like it had been cut with bolt cutters. The hasp on the latch was bent open, metal twisted in a way that looked like it had taken serious force. Jamie and I just stared at it. You saw the lock, right?" I said finally. "When we first got here?" "Yeah," she said slowly. "It was definitely locked. I remember her saying we weren't supposed to go in there." We both looked at the door. It was closed, but the latch hung loose. "We should call her," I said. "Tell her someone broke in." Jamie nodded, but she also did that thing she does when she's pretending not to be scared. Chin up, shoulders back. "After," she said. "Let's just look. If there's somebody hiding in there, we should know before we call anyone." Before I could argue, she reached out and pulled the door open. The smell hit us first. It was cold, damp air, with that same metallic undertone I'd noticed before, but stronger. Underneath it was that sour smell, like old, wet wood and something that had been shut away too long. I gagged a little. The root cellar, or whatever it was small and low-ceilinged. Dirt floor, stone walls, wooden shelves sagging under the weight of dusty jars. Most of them were empty, but a few still held something cloudy and unidentifiable floating in amber liquid. There were old wooden crates, a rusted shovel, a broken chair, and in the farthest corner, pressed tight against the wall, was a dark stain on the dirt. At first I thought it was just damp earth, but as my eyes adjusted, I noticed strange patterns, drag marks, almost leading from that corner toward the door. Deep grooves in the dirt, like something heavy had been pulled or had pulled itself. "Probably just water," Jamie muttered, but her voice didn't sound convinced. I turned in a slow circle. On the underside of the low wooden beams above us, right over the doorway, were dozens of small, dark marks, like fingerprints, or handprints that had pressed and slid over and over, trying to find purchase. "Okay," I said, my voice weirdly high. "We've seen it. Let's get out now." We backed out, shut the door, and, without even talking about it, pushed an old cabinet in front of it. It wouldn't stop anyone determined, but it made me feel better. We called Mrs. Dowell after that. She answered on the second ring. When I told her the padlock had been broken and that there were weird marks in the cellar, she went quiet. I could hear her breathing, slow and steady, like she was thinking hard. "Did you go inside?" she asked eventually. "Yes," I admitted. "We wanted to make sure no one was in there." Another long pause. "And did you move anything?" Her voice was tighter now. "No, just looked." "Good." She exhaled. "All right, I'm going to come up there this afternoon. You girls stay out of the basement until I do. That door was locked for a reason." "What reason?" I asked, but she'd already hung up. The rest of the day dragged. We stayed upstairs like she asked, trying to distract ourselves with TV and card games, but every little sound made me jump. I kept imagining someone, or something, down there in the dark cellar, now with the door unlatched, just waiting. It wasn't until around 5 that we heard a vehicle crunching up the gravel drive. We practically ran to the window. Instead of Mrs. Dowell's old truck, though, it was a white SUV with a sheriff's emblem on the side. My stomach dropped. A tall, middle-aged deputy got out, followed by Mrs. Dowell. She looked smaller than I remembered, and she wouldn't quite meet our eyes when we opened the door. "Afternoon," the deputy said. His name tag read Hollis. "Mind if we come in?" We stepped aside. "I got your message," Mrs. Dowell said, fussing with her hands. "Figured it'd be best to have someone from the sheriff's office look, too." "Given history?" "History?" Jamie asked. Neither of them answered. We went down to the basement together. Deputy Hollis first, one hand resting near his holster, Mrs. Dowell behind him clutching a ring of keys like a talisman, then me and Jamie. When the deputy saw the broken padlock, he frowned. "This wasn't cut," he said. "This is twisted. You see that?" I really wished he hadn't pointed it out. He pushed the cabinet aside and opened the root cellar door. The smell flooded out again. He shone his flashlight around, taking in the jars, the crates, the stain in the corner. He crouched to study the drag marks in the dirt, then looked up at the beam above the doorway, where those dark smudges were. He didn't say anything, but I saw his jaw tighten. "So," Jamie asked finally, what happened here?" Mrs. Dowell exhaled slowly, like she'd been holding the breath for years. "This cabin belonged to my brother," she said. "He built it when he was young. Liked his privacy. Liked his drink more. He had troubles." Her gaze drifted toward the cellar. "About 15 years ago, he took in a boarder. Young man, early 20s, from down in the valley. Just needed a room for a while," he said. "My brother let him sleep in the cellar, keep his things there. Cheaper that way." She swallowed. "One night, there was an argument. Neighbors heard shouting, but out here," she lifted a shoulder, "arguments happen. Next morning, my brother came into town like nothing was wrong. But that young man, no one ever saw him again." A cold feeling spread through my chest. "They searched," Deputy Hollis said quietly. "Top to bottom. My predecessor did, anyway. I've seen the file. Your brother swore the boy left in the night. Packed up, walked off. But there were signs that wasn't true." He shone the light toward the corner, on the dark stain, the grooves in the dirt. "They never proved anything," he went on. "Couldn't. No body. No confession. Just a lot of bad feeling. Your brother hung himself in town not long after." Mrs. Dowell's eyes were shiny. "I locked that door after the last deputy told me to. Said maybe if we kept it closed, it'd be easier to rent the place out. Nobody wants to stay in a house with, well, a missing person attached to it," Hollis finished. I stared at the cellar, the broken lock, the drag marks. "So you think someone came back? Broke it?" He shook his head slowly. "Maybe, but there are no signs of forced entry upstairs. Doors and windows are solid. It's just this lock that's broken, and in a way I can't make sense of. I'll file a report," but he didn't finish. He didn't have to. We went back upstairs after that. Deputy Hollis asked us a few more questions, then suggested, very gently, that we might feel better finishing our vacation somewhere else. We agreed. When we were loading the car, Mrs. Dowell came over to me while Jamie was inside grabbing her charger. "I'm sorry," she said, twisting her hands together. "I shouldn't have rented this place out. I just thought enough time had passed." "What's in that cellar, Mrs. Dowell?" I asked. "Really?" She hesitated. "After they searched," she said slowly, "my brother told me something. Swore it was the truth. Said the boy had gotten drunk, fallen, cracked his head on the corner of the shelf. Said he panicked. Said he dragged him over to that corner, and then he swore the boy started moving again." She shivered. "He said he heard him breathing for days, scratching at the door, begging. Only, when the deputies came, there wasn't There wasn't anyone there. She met my eyes. "You understand?" I didn't. Not really. But I nodded anyway. As we drove away, I looked back at the cabin. Just before the trees swallowed it from view, I saw Deputy Hollis standing at the basement window, looking in. For a second, I thought I saw something move in the shadows behind him, something pale and thin pressing up against the glass. I told myself it was a trick of the light. We stayed in a motel for the last 2 nights of our vacation. Plenty of noise, vending machines humming, kids running down the hall. I slept better there than I had in years. I wish I could say that was the end of it. A couple of weeks after we got home, I woke up one night to a sound that didn't belong in my apartment. I lay there, disoriented, trying to place it. A slow, deliberate scrape, like something heavy being dragged across a hard surface. It stopped, then started again, closer this time. Underneath the floorboards, under my bed. I live on the 2nd floor. There's no basement beneath me, just the downstairs neighbor's unit. I could have gone down to check with her, ask if she was moving furniture at 2 in the morning. That's what I tell myself now. But I didn't. I pulled my feet up onto the mattress, heart pounding, and listened as the sound dragged its way from one side of the room to the other, and then stopped, directly under where my bed was. After a long, breathless minute, there was a soft, careful knock. 3 times, spaced out, heavy, just like in the cabin. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe. Eventually, the sound stopped. Dawn came. Life went on. I haven't heard it again since. Not really, not clearly. But sometimes, when the house is very quiet, and I'm lying in bed trying to fall asleep, I become aware of how thin the floor is. How close the space beneath me must be. How easy it would be for something to press its hands up against the boards, feeling for a loose spot, a weakness, a way out. And every now and then, when I'm almost asleep, I swear I can hear the faintest sound. Not loud enough to be sure, just enough to make me wonder if the locked room under that cabin was ever really the only place it was. Story 7. The Parallel Patrol. I need to write this down while I can still think clearly, while I can still remember which version of events is real. My name is Daniel Foster. I'm 36 years old, and I've been a ranger in the George Washington National Forest for 7 years. What I'm about to tell you has been happening for the past 3 weeks, and I don't know how much longer I can keep pretending everything is normal. It started on a Tuesday morning in early November. I was assigned a routine patrol of the upper sections of the Big Schloss Trail, a moderately difficult hike that sees decent traffic during peak season but quiets down considerably once the weather turns cold. It was just me, my pack, and about 8 miles of trail to cover. Standard stuff, the kind of patrol I've done hundreds of times without incident. About 2 miles in, I noticed the first footprint. Fresh, maybe an hour old based on how the edges held their shape in the slightly damp soil. Boot print. Looked like a hiking boot, size 11 or so. Nothing unusual about that. Plenty of people hike these trails. But something made me stop and really look at it. And that's when I felt that first cold finger of unease trace down my spine. The tread pattern was familiar. Very familiar. I lifted my own boot and placed it next to the print. Identical. Same size, same wear pattern on the heel, same distinctive nick in the rubber on the left side where I'd caught it on a sharp rock last summer. It was my boot print, but I hadn't been on this section of trail yet. I was just starting my patrol. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe someone had the same boots, same size, similar wear pattern. It happened, right? Popular boot brand. Lots of rangers and hikers wore them. But that nick, that specific damage in that exact spot, the odds of that being coincidence felt astronomical. I kept hiking, telling myself I was being paranoid. But half a mile later, I found another print. Then another. They were spaced out at irregular intervals, sometimes a single clear impression in a muddy patch, sometimes a partial print on exposed rock. And they were all ahead of me, all leading in the direction I was going. Someone was walking my patrol route before me, someone wearing my exact boots. The practical part of my brain screamed that this had to be explainable, but the primitive part, the part that still remembers when humans were prey animals, was screaming something else entirely. I picked up my pace, torn between wanting to catch up to whoever was ahead of me and being terrified of what I'd find when I did. The trail wound through dense forest, visibility limited to maybe 30 feet in most places. Every bend in the path felt like a threat. Every thick patch of rhododendron felt like it was hiding something. Then I found the broken branch. It was hanging at eye level, snapped cleanly off a maple tree, the break fresh enough that sap was still beating on the wood. I remembered that branch. I'd broken it myself on my last patrol 2 weeks ago because it was hanging too low over the trail, a hazard for taller hikers. I'd broken it and tossed it into the underbrush. But here it was, broken again in the exact same spot, the exact same way. Fresh. My radio crackled, making me jump. "Foster, this is Base, checking in. Everything okay out there?" I grabbed the radio with a hand that wasn't quite steady. "Yeah, Base, all good. Just, found some unusual footprints on the trail. Might be another ranger working this area." "Negative. You're the only one assigned to that sector today. Probably just a hiker who got an early start." "Right, probably." "Foster out." But it wasn't a hiker. I knew it wasn't. Hikers don't break the same branch in the same spot 2 weeks apart. Hikers don't leave prints that match yours in every detail. I continued up the trail, my senses hyper alert now, and that's when I noticed the other signs. A scuff mark on a rock where I always put my hand for balance on a particularly steep section. A disturbed patch of leaves at the exact spot where I usually stop to check my GPS. Small things, easily missed, but I knew this trail intimately, and these were my habits, my patterns, being repeated by someone else. The trail opened up into a small clearing about 4 miles in, a spot where I usually took a break and ate lunch. There was a flat rock I always sat on, positioned to get the best view of the valley below. As I approached the clearing, I could see someone was sitting on that rock. My rock. Their back was to me, but I could see they were wearing a ranger uniform. The same model pack I carried was leaning against the rock beside them. "Hey," I called out, my voice sounding strange and tight even to my own ears. "Ranger Foster, George Washington Forest." Didn't know anyone else was working this sector today. The figure didn't move, didn't acknowledge me at all. Just sat there, perfectly still, looking out at the valley. I moved closer, my hand instinctively moving toward the bear spray on my belt, even though I couldn't have explained why I felt threatened. "Excuse me," I said. "I'm Ranger Foster. You need to identify yourself." Still nothing. I was maybe 20 feet away now, close enough to see details. The uniform was exactly like mine, down to the small coffee stain on the left shoulder that I'd gotten yesterday morning. The pack had the same tear in the side pocket that mine had. Even the posture was familiar, the way the shoulders were set, the angle of the head. "Turn around," I said, and I couldn't keep the fear out of my voice anymore. "Turn around right now." The figure stood up slowly, deliberately, and I realized with a jolt of pure terror that they moved exactly the way I moved. That slight hitch in the left knee from an old injury. The way they favored the right side. It was like watching myself on video, except I was standing right here. I wasn't over there. I couldn't be in both places. They started to turn, and every instinct I had screamed at me to run. I didn't want to see the face. Some deep, primal part of me knew that seeing that face would break something fundamental in my understanding of reality. So I ran, crashing back down the trail the way I'd come, not caring about the noise I made or the branches that whipped at my face. I didn't stop running until I reached my truck, my lungs burning and my legs shaking. I sat in the driver's seat with the doors locked, trying to catch my breath and convince myself I'd imagined everything. Maybe I was coming down with something. Maybe I was dehydrated and hallucinating. But when I looked at my boots, at that distinctive nick in the rubber, I knew what I'd seen was real. I called in sick for the rest of the week. Told my supervisor I had the flu, needed a few days to recover. He seemed to buy it, told me to rest up. But I couldn't rest. I spent those days researching, looking through old ranger reports, trying to find any mention of similar experiences. And I found things. Not many, and buried deep in files that had been archived and forgotten, but they were there. A ranger in 1987 who reported seeing his twin on patrol and subsequently requested a transfer. An incident report from 2003 about a ranger who'd become increasingly agitated and paranoid after claiming someone was following his exact route. A medical evaluation from 2015 recommending psychiatric leave for a ranger who insisted she'd met herself on the trail. None of the reports went anywhere. They were all dismissed as stress, fatigue, mental health issues. The rangers either transferred out, were put on leave, or learned to keep quiet about what they'd experienced. I tried to stay away. I really did. But I'm a professional, and I couldn't hide forever. When I finally went back to work, I requested different patrol routes, areas I'd never covered before. For a while, it seemed to work. No footprints, No broken branches, no sense of being followed or preceded by my own ghost. Then yesterday, I was assigned to cover for another ranger on the Massanutten Trail. It wasn't my usual area. I'd only been there once before about a year ago. I should have been safe. But 3 miles in, I found them. My boot prints, fresh and clear, leading ahead of me on a trail I hadn't walked yet today. And this time, I found something else. A cash box, the kind we use to store emergency supplies at remote locations. It was tucked under a rock overhang, hidden unless you knew exactly where to look. I didn't know it was there. Had no idea this particular cache existed. But someone had opened it recently. The seal was broken and the lock was hanging loose. Inside, along with the standard first aid supplies and emergency rations, was a note, written on official ranger service paper, in handwriting I recognized because it was mine. Stop following me. I was here first. My hands were shaking so badly, I dropped the note. I picked it up and read it again, hoping the words would change, would make sense. But they didn't. How could I be following someone if they were ahead of me? How could I be second if I'd never been here before? Unless I had been here before and didn't remember. Unless there were gaps in my memory, times I'd lost that I couldn't account for. I pulled out my phone and checked my photos, looking for any evidence of previous visits to this trail. And I found them. Pictures I didn't remember taking. Dozens of them, dated over the past 3 weeks, showing sections of trails I didn't remember hiking. In some of them, I could see my shadow stretched out on the ground ahead of me. Except the shadow was wrong. It was behind me when the sun angle said it should be in front. Or it was at the wrong length. Or, in a few shots, there were 2 shadows when there should have only been 1. I'm looking at one of those photos right now. It's from 2 days ago, according to the timestamp. But 2 days ago I was homesick. At least, I think I was. The more I try to remember, the fuzzier it gets. Did I really spend that day on my couch? Or is that just what I want to believe? When I check my watch, there are scratches on it that weren't there before. My boots are more worn than they should be. And there's mud on my uniform, dried and caked in the seams, even though I distinctly remember washing it last week. This morning, I decided to settle this once and for all. I was assigned to patrol the Big Schloss Trail again, the same route where this all started. But this time, I was going to do something different. I was going to turn back early. If someone was following my routine, mirroring my patrol, then breaking the pattern should break the cycle, right? I made it about 1.5 miles before I turned around, maybe 1/3 of the usual route. Hiked back to the trailhead at a good pace, constantly checking behind me for signs of pursuit. Nothing. No footprints. No sounds of anyone following. By the time I reached my truck, I was feeling almost confident. I'd outsmarted it, whatever it was. Changed the pattern, broken the loop. My truck was parked right where I'd left it. Engine was cold, no signs of being disturbed. But when I got closer, I saw something that made my blood turn to ice. There were 2 sets of tire tracks in the dirt. My truck had been moved. Not far, just backed out and then pulled back in, but someone had definitely driven it while I was on the trail. The driver's seat was adjusted differently than I'd left it. My GPS was on, showing a route I hadn't programmed. And on the passenger seat was my logbook, open to today's date. The entry was in my handwriting. Completed full 8-mile patrol of Big Schloss Trail. Trail conditions good. No incidents to report. Returned to vehicle at 14:47. But I hadn't completed the full patrol. I turned back early, and it was only 11:30 in the morning. That entry described something that hadn't happened yet. Or had it? Was I remembering wrong? Had I actually completed the patrol and somehow lost 3 hours? I got in the truck and just drove. Didn't go back to the station, didn't call in, just drove aimlessly through the back roads trying to make sense of everything. That's when I saw it in my rearview mirror. Another truck, same make and model as mine, same color, keeping pace about 100 yards back. I could see the driver, someone in a ranger uniform, but the sun was hitting the windshield wrong and I couldn't make out their face. I sped up. The truck behind me sped up. I slowed down, it slowed down. I turned onto a side road, and after a few seconds, so did they. This went on for 20 minutes, this vehicular shadow game, until I couldn't take it anymore. I pulled over, got out, and stood in the middle of the road, forcing the other truck to stop. The driver's door opened, and someone got out. They were too far away to see clearly. The sun was in my eyes, and they were just a silhouette. But as they started walking toward me, I could see they moved with that same hitch in the left knee, that same favoring of the right side. And I knew, with absolute certainty, that if I let them get close enough for me to see their face, something terrible would happen. Some line would be crossed that couldn't be uncrossed. So I got back in my truck and drove away. Just left them standing there in the middle of the road. When I checked the mirror, they were gone. The truck was gone too, like it had never been there at all. I'm sitting in a motel room now, 2 towns over from my usual area. I've got my laptop open, writing this all down because I need someone to know what's happening. I need there to be a record in case something happens. My phone keeps buzzing with calls from the station, from my supervisor, asking where I am and why I didn't report in. I haven't answered any of them because I don't know what to say. How do you explain that you're being stalked by yourself? That there's another you out there, following your routines, completing your patrols, living your life in parallel? And the worst part, the part that's really driving me crazy, is that I'm starting to suspect I'm not the original. What if I'm the copy, the echo, the one who shouldn't exist? What if the person I've been running from is the real Daniel Foster, and I'm just some glitch in reality, a reflection that gained consciousness and thought it was the real thing? I just checked my email, and there's a message from my own email address, sent 3 hours ago. The subject line says, "You need to stop." The message body is just one sentence. There can only be one of us, and I was here first. I don't know what that means. I don't know what happens if we both exist in the same space at the same time. But I'm starting to think that's where this is heading. That eventually, we're going to meet face to face, and one of us isn't going to walk away from that encounter. There's a knock on my motel room door. I didn't order anything, wasn't expecting anyone. The knock comes again, steady and patient. And through the door, I hear a voice that sounds exactly like mine say, "I know you're in there, Daniel. We need to talk. This has gone on long enough." I'm sitting here with my back against the far wall, as far from that door as I can get, and I'm trying to decide what to do. Part of me wants to open it, to finally confront whatever this is. But a bigger part is terrified that opening that door means accepting a reality I'm not ready to face. The knocking has stopped. When I finally worked up the courage to look through the peephole, there was no one there. But on the ground in front of my door, there's a set of muddy boot prints. My boot prints, leading away from the door and down the hallway. And at the end of the hall, just before turning the corner, I can see someone in a ranger uniform walking away. They're whistling a song I've been stuck in my head all day. A song no one else would know I'd been humming. I don't know what to do. I don't know if I should run or follow, or just stay locked in this room until I figure out what's real. All I know is that somewhere out there, on the trails I'm supposed to be patrolling, someone who looks exactly like me is doing my job, living my life, and maybe doing it better than I ever did. And I'm starting to wonder if the world really needs both of us. The phone is ringing again. It's my supervisor. I should answer it. But what if it's not really him? What if when I answer, I hear my own voice on the other end, telling me to come back, telling me everything will make sense if I just return to the forest? I think I'm going to answer it. I think I need to know. I'll update this if I can. If I'm still me when this is over. If there's still a me to update it. God, I hope there is. Story 8. The Children's Laughter. My name is Andrea Walsh, and I've been a park ranger at the Pisgah National Forest for 12 years. I'm 41 years old, married, no kids of my own, and up until 6 months ago, I would have told you I had the best job in the world. Now I'm not so sure. Now I'm writing this at 3 in the morning because I can't sleep, because every time I close my eyes I hear them. The children, always laughing, always playing, never stopping. It started last April during a routine trail maintenance survey in the Shining Rock Wilderness area. There's a valley there, nothing special about it on paper, just a depression between 2 ridges with a small creek running through it. It's not on any of the popular hiking routes, doesn't have any notable features that would draw crowds. Most people pass right by without giving it a second look. I was documenting erosion patterns along the creek bed, taking photos and GPS coordinates, standard boring work that makes up about 80% of my job. It was a Tuesday afternoon, warm for April, and I was looking forward to finishing up and heading home early. That's when I heard it for the first time. Laughter. Children's laughter, high and bright, echoing through the valley. Not just 1 or 2 kids, but many of them, a whole group playing together. Along with the laughter came other sounds, the rhythmic squeak of swings, the rattle of chains, the hollow thump of feet on wooden playground equipment. My first thought was confusion. There were no playgrounds anywhere near this area, no campgrounds or day-use facilities where families might bring kids. The nearest developed recreation area was at least 5 miles away through rough terrain. What were children doing out here? I followed the sounds, pushing through the underbrush toward what I thought was the source. The laughter got louder as I got closer, joined by voices calling out to each other. Higher, push me higher. My turn on the slide. Come catch me. The innocent, joyful sounds of kids at play. I came around a thick stand of rhododendron and stopped dead. The valley opened up before me, and there, in a flat area near the creek, I could see them. The swings, moving back and forth in perfect rhythm, chains creaking with each arc. A slide, metal gleaming in the afternoon sun. A merry-go-round, spinning slowly. A seesaw, going up and down, all empty. No children, just the equipment, moving on its own, accompanied by the sounds of a playground full of kids. I stood there for a long moment, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Wind, I thought. Had to be wind moving the equipment. But there was no wind. The trees around me were still, the leaves hanging motionless in the warm air. And wind doesn't explain voices, doesn't explain laughter that sounds so real you could swear the kids are standing right next to you. I pulled out my radio. Base, this is Walsh. I'm in the Shining Rock area. Coordinates, I'm sending them now. I've got a situation here I need to report. Static, then my supervisor's voice. Go ahead, Walsh. There's a playground in the valley. Old equipment, swings and slides. It's not on any of our maps. Do we have a recreation facility here at some point that got decommissioned? A long pause. Andrea, there's no playground in that area. Never has been. I'm looking right at it, Jim. It's here. Old but still standing. Metal equipment. Probably dates back to the 50s or 60s based on the style. Another pause, longer this time. Andrea, I need you to send me those coordinates and some photos. And then I need you to leave that area. Don't go any closer to the equipment. Something in his tone made my skin prickle. Jim, what's going on? What is this place? Just send the photos and get out of there. We'll talk when you get back to the station. I took the photos, dozens of them, documenting the equipment from every angle. The whole time, the sounds continued. Laughter, shouting, the creaks and squeaks of swings and chains. But the playground remained empty, no children anywhere in sight. As I was backing away, preparing to leave like Jim had told me, I noticed something carved into one of the swing set's support posts. Words, rough and weathered but still legible. Mercy Ridge School, 1952. I photographed that too, then hiked out of the valley as fast as I could without actually running. The sounds followed me for the first 100 yards or so, then faded gradually until I could no longer hear them. By the time I reached my truck, it was silent again, just the normal sounds of the forest. Back at the station, Jim was waiting for me with a file folder, old and worn, pulled from the back of some archive cabinet. He spread the contents across his desk, historical documents, old photographs, newspaper clippings yellowed with age. Mercy Ridge School, he said, pointing to one of the photos. Built in 1947 to serve the families living in this area before it became national forest land. Small, only about 30 students, kindergarten through 8th grade. It closed in 1957 when the last families were relocated and the land was incorporated into the Forest Service. Okay, I said slowly. So there was a school. What happened to it? Jim pulled out a newspaper clipping, dated June 12, 1956. The headline made my stomach drop. Tragic fire at Mountain School claims 22 lives. I read the article with growing horror. The school had caught fire on a Tuesday afternoon, right in the middle of recess. The children had been outside playing while the fire started in the building, likely from faulty electrical wiring. When teachers tried to evacuate the kids, they found all the doors had somehow jammed shut. The windows had bars on them, installed to prevent break-ins. There was no way out. 22 people died, 18 children and 4 teachers. The survivors, those who'd been far enough from the building when it went up, described hearing the screams of their classmates trapped inside. The fire burned so hot and fast that by the time help arrived, there was nothing left but ashes and twisted metal. The playground equipment survived, Jim said quietly. It was far enough from the building. When they cleared the site after the tragedy, they removed most of the debris but left the playground. Nobody wanted to touch it, felt disrespectful somehow. Over time, the forest reclaimed the area. The building's foundation is still there, if you know where to look, but you'd never notice it unless someone pointed it out. And the sounds. I asked, though I already knew the answer. Rangers have been reporting them since the 70s. Always the same, children playing on the equipment, always in the afternoon. Multiple witnesses over the years. It happens every day at exactly 3:47 p.m. I check my watch, then check the timestamp on my photos. 3:47 p.m. Every single photo, every recording, all time-stamped 3:47 p.m. even though I'd been there for at least 20 minutes and my watch had definitely been moving forward. That's when the fire started, Jim continued. 3:47 p.m. on June 12, 1956. The children were at recess. They'd just gone outside to play. They had about 5 minutes of normal, happy playtime before everything went wrong. So what I heard, what I saw, nobody knows exactly what it is. Residual haunting, some people call it. Like a recording playing over and over. The children's last happy moments, preserved somehow in that place. Most rangers who encounter it just note it in their reports and move on. It's not dangerous, not threatening, just sad. I wanted to leave it at that. File my report, mark the location, and avoid that valley from then on. But I couldn't stop thinking about those children. About that last perfect moment of play before tragedy struck. About laughter that had been echoing through that valley for nearly 70 years with no one to hear it. So I went back. Not officially, not as part of any assignment. I went back on my day off, hiking in from a different approach to avoid having to explain what I was doing. I told myself I just wanted to see it again, to confirm what I'd experienced. But the truth is, I felt drawn there. Like those children were waiting for someone to acknowledge them, to witness their joy. I arrived at the valley at 3:30 p.m., giving myself time to set up before the phenomenon started. The playground equipment sat silent and still in the afternoon light, rust showing through old paint, chains hanging slack. It looked abandoned and sad, a forgotten relic of a tragedy no one wanted to remember. At exactly 3:47 p.m., everything changed. The swings began moving, slowly at first, then building to the full arc of a child being pushed. The merry-go-round started spinning. The seesaw went into motion, and the sounds began, that same chorus of laughter and shouting, the joyful noise of kids at play. But this time, because I was expecting it, because I was really paying attention, I saw something else. Shapes, translucent and flickering, barely visible even when I looked directly at them. Children, running and playing, pushing each other on swings, taking turns on the slide. I could almost see their faces, almost make out individual features. A girl with pigtails, a boy with a gap-toothed smile, a smaller child, maybe 5 or 6, being carefully helped onto a swing by an older student. They were happy. That's what struck me most. Whatever had preserved this moment, whatever force or energy or impossible physics was playing out this scene over and over, it had captured them in a moment of pure, uncomplicated joy. Before the fire, before the fear and pain and tragedy. Just kids being kids, playing in the sunshine, enjoying recess like children should. I started visiting regularly. Every few days, I'd find an excuse to be in that area around 3:47 p.m. I told Jim I was doing a long-term erosion study, which was technically true, though that's not why I kept going back. I went back because those children deserved to have someone witness their joy. Because after 70 years of playing in an empty valley with no one to see them, they deserved an audience. The more time I spent there, the more details I noticed. The same children appeared in the same places every time, playing out the same games, speaking the same words. A girl in a blue dress always climbed to the top of the slide and paused there, looking out over the valley before sliding down. 2 boys always raced from the swings to the merry-go-round, and the one in red always won. A small group of girls always stood near the edge of the playground, playing some kind of hand clap game I could almost hear the words to. It was like watching a film on loop, the same 5 minutes repeated endlessly. But there was something else too. Sometimes, when I was very still and very quiet, I thought I could feel them noticing me. The translucent shapes would pause, would seem to turn in my direction. The laughter would change tone slightly, like they were trying to include me in their game. That should have been my warning to stop. Should have been the sign that I was getting too involved, too invested in something I didn't understand and couldn't control. But I didn't stop. I kept coming back, kept watching, kept bearing witness to their joy. Then, about a month ago, something changed. I arrived at my usual time, set up in my usual spot at the edge of the clearing. 347 came and went. The equipment began moving, the sounds began playing. But this time, the laughter was different. Sharper, more intense. And underneath it, barely audible, I heard something else. Screaming. Children screaming. Not the playful shrieks of kids having fun, but genuine screams of terror and pain. The swings were moving faster now, jerking violently on their chains. The merry-go-round spun so fast, it was just a blur. The seesaw slammed up and down with enough force that I could hear the wood cracking. And the translucent shapes of the children were clearer now, more solid, and their faces were twisted in expressions of fear. I could see the girl in the blue dress at the top of the slide, but now she was looking back at something, her mouth open in a scream. The two boys were running, not playing but fleeing, and the one in red was stumbling, falling. The group of girls at the edge had broken apart, some running toward the playground, others backing away, all of them looking at something I couldn't see. Smoke. I could smell smoke. And heat. An unnatural heat radiating from somewhere behind me, from where the school building had once stood. I turned slowly, afraid of what I'd see, and there it was. A structure, translucent like the children, but growing more solid by the second. The school building, materializing out of nothing. And it was on fire. Flames poured from the windows, licked up the walls, consumed the roof. I could see shapes moving inside, pressing against the windows, hands beating on glass that wouldn't break. I could hear them clearly now, the screams of the trapped children, calling for help that would never come. The children on the playground were trying to reach the building, trying to help their friends, but something was holding them back. Teachers, translucent like the children but more solid, were grabbing kids and pulling them away from the burning structure. And the children were fighting them, crying, screaming for their friends still trapped inside. I don't remember running. My next clear memory is of being half a mile away, crouched behind a fallen log, sobbing and shaking. The sounds followed me, the screams and the roar of flames, and the terrible, terrible crying of children who couldn't understand why they couldn't save their friends. When I finally got control of myself and made my way back to the valley, everything was quiet. The playground equipment sat motionless. There was no smoke, no fire, no building. Just the forest, peaceful and still in the late afternoon light. I filed a report with Jim, told him what I'd experienced. He listened without interrupting, then pulled out that old file folder again. He added my report to it, stacking it on top of dozens of others. Different rangers, different dates, all describing the same progression. First you hear the laughter, then you see the children playing. Then, if you keep coming back, eventually you witness the fire. "You have to stop going there, Andrea," Jim said, his voice gentle but firm. "Every ranger who's kept visiting, who's gotten too invested in those children, eventually they see the fire. And once you've seen the fire, once you've witnessed the full tragedy, it changes you. Some rangers request transfers. Some quit entirely. A few," he paused. "A few became obsessed, spent all their time trying to figure out how to change what happened, how to save those children. It's not possible. You can't change the past. You can only choose whether to keep reliving it." I promised him I'd stay away. I meant it when I said it. But that was 4 weeks ago, and I haven't been able to keep that promise. I've been back 7 times since then. Each time, I experienced the same sequence. Happy children playing, then the transition, then the fire, then the screaming. It plays out exactly the same way every time. And every time I hope desperately that something will be different, that somehow this time the children will escape, that this time the ending will change. It never does. The past is fixed. The tragedy is unchangeable. And I'm slowly destroying myself by continuing to witness it. But I can't stop. Those children deserve to have someone remember them. Someone who knows their names and their faces and their last moments. I've been researching them, tracking down old records and yearbooks. Sarah Meadows, the girl in the blue dress. Tommy and Jake Harrison, the brothers who raced to the merry-go-round. The 4 girls who played hand-clap games. Mary, Beth, Susan, and Little, and who was only 6 years old. I know them now. I know their stories, their families, where they're buried. And knowing them makes it worse, because now when I watch them play, when I watch them die, they're not just anonymous ghosts. They're real children who had real lives cut impossibly short. Last week I was there during the fire sequence, and I saw something new. One of the children, Tommy Harrison, the boy in red who always lost the race, stopped running and turned to look directly at me. Not through me, not past me, but at me. Our eyes met, and I saw recognition there. He knew I was watching. He knew I'd been watching for months. And the expression on his face wasn't fear or pain or even sadness. It was gratitude. He was thanking me for being there, for witnessing, for remembering. Then he turned and ran toward the burning building, and I watched him disappear into the smoke and flames along with all the others, playing out their tragedy one more time. I'm writing this at 3 a.m. because I can't sleep. Because in 4 hours I'm supposed to meet with Jim and the regional supervisor to discuss my continued fitness for duty. Because my wife has started talking about separation if I don't get help. Because I know I need to stop going to that valley, need to let those children rest, need to move on with my life. But it's Tuesday, and at 3:47 this afternoon, those children will play for 5 minutes in the sunshine before their world ends in fire and screaming. And someone should be there to see them, to remember them, to bear witness to their joy and their tragedy. I think it's going to be me. I think it's always going to be me. Because someone has to remember. Someone has to watch. Someone has to care that 22 people died in that valley 70 years ago, and that somehow, some piece of them remains, trapped in their last moments, playing forever in the shadows of the fire that took them. The sounds don't stay in the valley anymore. I hear them at home now, faint but present. Laughter echoing through my house at 3:47 every afternoon. The squeak of swings outside my window when I know there are no swings there. And sometimes, late at night when I'm trying to sleep, I hear the screaming. The children calling for help, begging someone to save them. I can't save them. Jim was right about that. The past is fixed, but I can remember them. I can bear witness. I can make sure that their last moments of joy aren't forgotten, aren't lost to time like their building was lost to fire. Even if it costs me everything. Even if it costs me my sanity, my marriage, my career. Someone has to remember. And I think, whether I wanted it or not, that someone is me. It's almost time. The sun is coming up, and I need to get ready. I have to be at the valley by 3:30 to set up. The children will be there at 3:47, right on schedule. They're always on schedule. And I'll be there too, watching, remembering, bearing witness to joy and tragedy, to laughter and screaming, to the last 5 minutes of happiness before everything burned. Someone has to remember. Someone has to watch. I just wish it didn't have to be me. That was 2 months ago. Since then, I've found the cabin 4 more times. Always in different locations, always identical, always with the logbook open to an entry I've already read, waiting for me to fulfill the prophecy by writing it. And each time, I notice more details that disturb me. The coffee is always the same temperature. Hot, but not burning, exactly the temperature I prefer. The tin cans on the shelf, when I finally worked up the courage to check them, contain my favorite foods. The camping stove is the exact model I used to own before I upgraded to a newer one. Everything in that cabin is tailored to me, customized for my preferences and habits. And the logbook entries are getting darker. The one I wrote last week said things I don't remember thinking, described feelings I don't remember having. But I must have written them because there they were in my handwriting, and everything else in the logbook has come true. According to the entry dated today, November 14th, I'm supposed to find the cabin one more time. This afternoon, somewhere along the Bell Farm Trail. The entry says this will be my 9th visit, and that this time I'm going to stay. Not for a few minutes like before, but for hours. And in those hours, I'm going to figure out what the cabin really is, what it wants, and why it's chosen me. I don't want to go. I don't want to fulfill another prophecy. Don't want to write another entry that some past version of me will read and dread. But I can feel the pull, like there's a string attached to my chest, tugging me toward the Bell Farm Trail, toward whatever is waiting there. My supervisor told me not to obsess, not to try to change the pattern. But he was wrong about one thing. There is damage, but it's not just psychological. Every time I find the cabin, I lose time. Not a lot, just minutes here and there that I can't account for. Gaps in my memory where I should have been hiking, but instead I was somewhere else, doing something I can't remember. And my apartment, my truck, even my locker at the station, they're all starting to look like that cabin. The same sparse functionality, the same weathered appearance, like I'm slowly transforming my entire life to match that impossible place. My girlfriend noticed it last week, asked me why I'd rearranged all my furniture to match that creepy cabin I told her about. But I hadn't rearranged anything. It just looked different, or maybe I was seeing it differently, or maybe the cabin was spreading, infecting other spaces with its presence. The logbook entry for today, the one I haven't written yet but have already read, ends with a sentence that terrifies me. I understand now. The cabin isn't following me. I'm becoming the cabin. And soon there won't be a difference between Marcus Chun and the place where Marcus Chun has always been waiting. I don't know what that means. I don't want to know. But in a few hours, I'm going to hike the Bell Farm Trail. I'm going to find the cabin in whatever new location it's appeared, and I'm going to write those words in the logbook. Because I've already read them, which means I've already written them, which means they're already true. The past and future are collapsing together, and I'm caught in the middle, a fixed point around which time loops and doubles back on itself. I'm writing this now because I need someone to know what happened to me, what's happening to me, before I complete the transformation into whatever the cabin wants me to become. If you're a ranger reading this, if you find a small cabin in the Daniel Boone National Forest that's not on any map, don't go inside. Don't read the logbook. Don't try to understand it. Just mark the location and walk away. Because once it knows you've seen it, once you've read your own future in that logbook, you're part of it. You're trapped in the loop, living out events you've already read about, writing entries you've already experienced. And eventually, like me, you'll realize you're not finding the cabin anymore. You've become it. A fixed point in space and time, appearing and disappearing, drawing others into your loop, spreading the pattern like a virus. It's almost time. I can feel the pull getting stronger, that string in my chest drawing tighter. I need to go to the Bell Farm Trail. Need to find the cabin one last time. Need to write the final entry that I've already read, that describes my transformation into something that's no longer quite human, no longer quite real. The cabin is waiting. It's always waiting. And soon, I'll be waiting too, inside those weathered walls, with a warm cup of coffee and a logbook full of futures that haven't happened yet, but always will. If you find me there, if you're the next ranger to stumble across that impossible structure, do me a favor. Don't read the logbook. Don't try to help. Just close the door quietly and walk away. Because by then, I won't be Marcus Chin anymore. I'll be the cabin itself, another impossible thing in these mountains, waiting to trap the next person who makes the mistake of trying to understand what can't be understood. The loop continues. It always continues. And now I'm part of it forever. I'm going to the trail now. The entry is waiting to be written. The prophecy is waiting to be fulfilled. And somewhere in the forest, in a location that shifts and changes but remains eternally the same, a small cabin is waiting for me to come home. To finally stop wandering and become what I've always been meant to be. A door that opens inward, onto nothing but more doors, more cabins, more versions of myself writing the same entry over and over across infinite timelines. I'm sorry. To anyone who cares about me, to my family and friends, to the person I was before I found that cabin the first time, I'm sorry. I tried to fight it, tried to break the pattern, but some loops can't be broken. Some prophecies fulfill themselves. The cabin is calling. I have to answer. And somewhere in the future, someone will find this document and wonder what happened to Marcus Chun, the ranger who disappeared while on patrol. They'll search for me, maybe find the cabin, maybe read the logbook. And if they do, they'll see my last entry, dated today, describing exactly this moment, these exact thoughts, this final surrender to something I still don't fully understand. The loop closes. The circle completes. And I finally go home. Story 9. The cabin that follows. My name is Marcus Chun. I'm 29 years old, and I've been a ranger in the Daniel Boone National Forest for 4 years. I'm riding this in my truck at a rest stop 200 miles from my patrol area because I can't go back to my apartment, can't go back to the station, can't go anywhere I've been before. Because no matter where I go, the cabin is there waiting for me. And every time I find it, the logbook inside has one more entry that I haven't written yet. Let me start from the beginning, back when this was just another weird thing that happened in the woods, before it became the thing that's slowly destroying my grip on reality. It was mid-September, early morning patrol in the Red River Gorge area. I was checking on backcountry campsites, making sure they hadn't been trashed, looking for illegal fire rings, the usual routine. The trail I was following wasn't heavily trafficked, just a spur path that led to a couple of primitive sites used mainly by serious backpackers looking to get away from the crowds. About 3 miles in, I noticed something off the trail to my right. A structure, barely visible through the trees. My first thought was illegal construction. Someone had built an unauthorized shelter on Forest Service land. It happens more than you'd think. People who want their own private wilderness retreat and don't care about regulations. I pushed through the underbrush to investigate, and that's when I got my first good look at it. A small cabin, maybe 12 by 12 feet, built from weathered logs that looked like they'd been there for decades. It had a pitched roof, one small window, and a door that hung slightly crooked on its hinges. The whole thing had that abandoned look, the kind of structure that's been slowly surrendering to the forest for years. But here's the thing, it wasn't on any of my maps. I pulled out my GPS unit, checked my position, cross-referenced with the detailed property maps we keep. Nothing. According to every official record, there was no structure here, just unbroken forest. I approached carefully, calling out the standard announcement. Forest Service, anyone inside? No response, just the quiet sounds of wind in the trees. The door wasn't locked, it didn't even have a lock, just a simple wooden latch. I pushed it open and stepped inside. The interior was sparse, but not empty. A small wooden table sat against one wall, a single chair tucked underneath it. There was a shelf with a few old tin cans, their labels long since faded away. A camping stove in one corner, the kind that looked like it was from the 70s. And on the table, a logbook. Rangers use logbooks in backcountry shelters, places for hikers to record their visits, share trail conditions, leave messages. But this wasn't an official shelter, and this wasn't an official logbook. It was just a plain spiral notebook, the kind you'd buy at any grocery store. The cover was water-stained and warped, like it had been here a while. I opened it, expecting to find hiker entries or maybe notes from whoever had built this place. What I found instead made me go cold. The first entry was dated 3 days earlier, September 15th, written in handwriting I didn't immediately recognize. Found this cabin about 3 miles north of Chimney Top Rock. Not on any maps. Interior is basic but dry. Coffee on the table was still warm when I arrived, like someone had just left. No sign of who built it or why it's here. We'll report to station when I get back. MC. My initials. And as I looked closer at the handwriting, the way the letters formed, the distinctive way I always made my lowercase A with a little tail, I realized it was my handwriting. But I hadn't been here 3 days ago. I'd been nowhere near this area. I'd spent September 15th doing paperwork at the station. My supervisor could confirm that. I flipped through more pages. The entries went back years, different handwriting, different names. Hikers who'd found the cabin, stayed a night, moved on. But they were all dated wrong. Dates from the future, some of them months or years ahead. And scattered among them, every 10 or 12 pages, were more entries in my handwriting. Different dates, different circumstances, but all signed M.C. The most recent entry before mine was dated September 22nd, 5 days in the future from when I stood there reading it. It was also in my handwriting, back at the cabin again. 4th time now, or maybe 5th, I'm losing count. It's never in the same place twice, but I always recognize it when I find it. Same table, same chair, same tin cans on the shelf. The coffee was warm again today. I think I'm starting to understand what this place is, but I don't want to write it down. Don't want to make it real by putting it into words. If you're reading this, MC, and you don't remember writing it, get out. Don't come back. Don't try to figure it out. Just leave and pretend you never found this place. My hands were shaking as I read it. This was insane. Time-stamped entries from dates that hadn't happened yet, all in my handwriting, warning myself about something I didn't understand. I pulled out my phone, took pictures of every page, documented the interior of the cabin, the exterior, the surrounding area. Then I got out of there, hiked back to my truck at double time, and went straight to my supervisor's office. I showed him everything. The photos, the GPS coordinates, the entries in the logbook. I expected skepticism, maybe concern about my mental state. Instead, he just looked tired. "How many entries did you count?" he asked quietly. "How many in your handwriting?" 7. Spread across maybe 2 years. You found it early then. Most rangers don't encounter it until they've been here at least 5 years. He pulled out a file, old and thick, and spread some papers across his desk. We call it the Wandering Cabin. Been documented since at least the 60s, probably longer. Shows up in different locations throughout the forest, never the same place twice. Rangers find it, document it, then can never find it again. Until they do, somewhere completely different. The logbook entries, I said. The ones dated in the future, in my handwriting, are going to happen. You're going to find that cabin again, Marcus, probably multiple times. And each time you do, you'll write in that logbook. Dates and details might vary, but the core experience will match what you've already read. That's impossible. You can't read your own future. That's not how time works, isn't it? He fixed me with a steady gaze. You found a cabin that doesn't exist on any map, that moves location without anyone moving it, that has a logbook full of entries from dates that haven't happened yet. We stopped worrying about what's possible or impossible a long time ago. Now we just document and try to minimize the damage. Damage? What damage? It's just a cabin. The psychological damage, Marcus. Knowing what you're going to experience before you experience it. Reading your own words from a future you haven't lived yet. Some rangers become obsessed, spend all their time searching for the cabin, trying to change what they wrote, trying to break the pattern. It doesn't work. The entries always come true. Every word, every detail. And the more you try to avoid it, the harder the universe seems to work to make sure it happens anyway. I wanted to dismiss it all as nonsense, as some elaborate prank or mass delusion. But I'd seen the cabin. I'd read the entries. And something deep inside me, some instinct I couldn't name, knew he was telling the truth. So what do? I asked. Nothing. Just do your job. If you find the cabin again, document it and move on. Don't obsess over the logbook entries. Don't try to change them. Just accept that there are some things in these mountains we don't understand, and the best way to deal with them is to leave them alone. I tried to follow that advice. I really did. But it's hard to forget you've read your own future, hard not to watch for patterns, hard not to wonder when and where the cabin will appear again. It took 3 weeks. I was patrolling a completely different section of forest, at least 10 miles from where I'd found the cabin the first time. But there it was, tucked in among some boulders, looking exactly the same. Same weathered logs, same crooked door, same everything. I checked my GPS, different coordinates, different location, but definitely the same cabin. The coffee cup was on the table, still steaming. I touched it. It was hot, like someone had just poured it seconds ago and then vanished. But I was alone. I'd been alone on this trail for hours, hadn't seen another person all day. The logbook was there, open to a new entry dated today, September 22nd. My handwriting, the entry I'd already read 3 weeks ago, warning my past self to stay away. And I was living it now, fulfilling prophecy I'd already read, trapped in a loop I couldn't escape. I wrote a new entry. I didn't plan to, didn't want to, but my hand moved on its own, picking up the pen that was lying beside the logbook and writing. 5th visit, or maybe 6th. The cabin is north of Wildcat Creek today, about 2 miles from the Thunder Ridge Trail. Everything is the same. Everything is always the same. I think the cabin exists outside normal time, outside normal space. It's not moving. We're moving around it, seeing it from different angles in the timeline. Or maybe it's moving and we're standing still. Does it matter? I'm trapped in this loop, writing entries I've already read, living moments I've already experienced secondhand. If you're reading this, MC, know that it doesn't get better. It just keeps happening. I left quickly, almost running back to the trail. But I'd only made it about 100 yards when I realized I'd forgotten to take photos for my report. Protocol required documentation of any unusual structures. I turned back, GPS in hand, to mark the exact location. The cabin was gone. I stood in the exact coordinates where it had been minutes earlier, but there was nothing there. Just boulders and trees and undisturbed forest floor. No cabin, no footprints, no sign anything had been there at all. Even my own boot prints, the ones I'd just made walking to the cabin, had vanished. That was 2 months ago. Since then, I've found the cabin 4 more times. Always in different locations, always identical, always with the logbook open to an entry I've already read, waiting for me to fulfill the prophecy by writing it. And each time, I notice more details that disturb me. The coffee is always the same temperature. Hot, but not burning, exactly the temperature I prefer. The tin cans on the shelf, when I finally worked up the courage to check them, contain my favorite foods. The camping stove is the exact model I used to own before I upgraded to a newer one. Everything in that cabin is tailored to me, customized for my preferences and habits. And the logbook entries are getting darker. The one I wrote last week said things I don't remember thinking, described feelings I don't remember having. But I must have written them because there they were in my handwriting, and everything else in the logbook has come true. According to the entry dated today, November 14th, I'm supposed to find the cabin one more time. This afternoon, somewhere along the Bell Farm Trail. The entry says this will be my 9th visit, and that this time I'm going to stay. Not for a few minutes like before, but for hours. And in those hours, I'm going to figure out what the cabin really is, what it wants, and why it's chosen me. I don't want to go. I don't want to fulfill another prophecy. Don't want to write another entry that some past version of me will read and dread. But I can feel the pull, like there's a string attached to my chest, tugging me toward the Bell Farm Trail, toward whatever is waiting there. My supervisor told me not to obsess, not to try to change the pattern. But he was wrong about one thing. There is damage, but it's not just psychological. Every time I find the cabin, I lose time. Not a lot, just minutes here and there that I can't account for. Gaps in my memory where I should have been hiking, but instead I was somewhere else, doing something I can't remember. And my apartment, my truck, even my locker at the station, they're all starting to look like that cabin. The same sparse functionality, the same weathered appearance, like I'm slowly transforming my entire life to match that impossible place. My girlfriend noticed it last week, asked me why I'd rearranged all my furniture to match that creepy cabin I told her about. But I hadn't rearranged anything. It just looked different, or maybe I was seeing it differently, or maybe the cabin was spreading, infecting other spaces with its presence. The logbook entry for today, the one I haven't written yet but have already read, ends with a sentence that terrifies me. I understand now. The cabin isn't following me. I'm becoming the cabin. And soon there won't be a difference between Marcus Chun and the place where Marcus Chun has always been waiting. I don't know what that means. I don't want to know. But in a few hours, I'm going to hike the Bell Farm Trail. I'm going to find the cabin in whatever new location it's appeared, and I'm going to write those words in the logbook. Because I've already read them, which means I've already written them, which means they're already true. The past and future are collapsing together, and I'm caught in the middle, a fixed point around which time loops and doubles back on itself. I'm writing this now because I need someone to know what happened to me, what's happening to me, before I complete the transformation into whatever the cabin wants me to become. If you're a ranger reading this, if you find a small cabin in the Daniel Boone National Forest that's not on any map, don't go inside. Don't read the logbook. Don't try to understand it. Just mark the location and walk away. Because once it knows you've seen it, once you've read your own future in that logbook, you're part of it. You're trapped in the loop, living out events you've already read about, writing entries you've already experienced. And eventually, like me, you'll realize you're not finding the cabin anymore. You've become it. A fixed point in space and time, appearing and disappearing, drawing others into your loop, spreading the pattern like a virus. It's almost time. I can feel the pull getting stronger, that string in my chest drawing tighter. I need to go to the Bell Farm Trail. Need to find the cabin one last time. Need to write the final entry that I've already read, that describes my transformation into something that's no longer quite human, no longer quite real. The cabin is waiting. It's always waiting. And soon, I'll be waiting too, inside those weathered walls, with a warm cup of coffee and a logbook full of futures that haven't happened yet, but always will. If you find me there, if you're the next ranger to stumble across that impossible structure, do me a favor. Don't read the logbook. Don't try to help. Just close the door quietly and walk away. Because by then, I won't be Marcus Chin anymore. I'll be the cabin itself, another impossible thing in these mountains, waiting to trap the next person who makes the mistake of trying to understand what can't be understood. The loop continues. It always continues. And now I'm part of it forever. I'm going to the trail now. The entry is waiting to be written. The prophecy is waiting to be fulfilled. And somewhere in the forest, in a location that shifts and changes but remains eternally the same, a small cabin is waiting for me to come home, to finally stop wandering and become what I've always been meant to be. A door that opens inward, onto nothing but more doors, more cabins, more versions of myself writing the same entry over and over across infinite timelines. I'm sorry. To anyone who cares about me, to my family and friends, to the person I was before I found that cabin the first time, I'm sorry. I tried to fight it, tried to break the pattern, but some loops can't be broken. Some prophecies fulfill themselves. The cabin is calling. I have to answer. And somewhere in the future, Someone will find this document and wonder what happened to Marcus Chun, the ranger who disappeared while on patrol. They'll search for me, maybe find the cabin, maybe read the logbook. And if they do, they'll see my last entry, dated today, describing exactly this moment, these exact thoughts, this final surrender to something I still don't fully understand. The loop closes. The circle completes. And I finally go home. 10. The sound beneath the trail. My name is Rebecca Torres. I'm 33 years old, and I've been a ranger in the Jefferson National Forest for 8 years. What I'm about to tell you is going to sound insane, and honestly, I'm not entirely sure I'm still sane after what I've experienced. But this needs to be documented, needs to be on record somewhere, because if something happens to me, someone needs to know why I stopped patrolling certain sections of the forest. Someone needs to understand what's underneath. It started 4 months ago, late June, during what should have been a routine trail assessment. I was checking the condition of the Appalachian Trail section that runs through our district, looking for erosion damage, fallen trees, anything that might need maintenance before the peak summer hiking season hit full swing. It's work I've done 100 times, familiar and straightforward, the kind of thing I can almost do on autopilot. I was about 6 miles into the section, moving at a good pace, when I heard it for the first time. A voice, muffled and distant, like someone calling from far away. At first I thought it was just another hiker ahead of me on the trail, maybe someone who'd gotten separated from their group. I called back, standard protocol, letting them know I was a ranger and could help if they needed it. No response, just that same muffled quality, words I couldn't quite make out, rising and falling in tone like someone was having a conversation. I picked up my pace, figuring I'd catch up to them around the next bend or two. But the voice didn't get any louder as I moved forward. If anything, it seemed to be coming from the wrong direction, not ahead of me on the trail, but somewhere to my left, off in the forest. I stopped, trying to pinpoint the source. The voice continued, still too muffled to understand, but definitely human. Male, I thought, though it was hard to be certain. And now that I was really listening, I realized something strange. The voice wasn't coming from the forest to my left. It was coming from below me, from underneath the trail. I crouched down, putting my ear close to the ground. The voice was clearer now, still muffled but unmistakably coming from beneath the packed earth of the trail. I could hear other sounds too, shuffling movement, what might have been footsteps, the echo that suggested enclosed space rather than open forest. "Hello," I called out, my face inches from the ground. "Can you hear me? Are you trapped?" The voice stopped abruptly. For a moment there was silence. Then I heard a different sound. Knocking. Someone was knocking on something solid, the rhythm deliberate, 3 slow knocks followed by 2 quick ones. A signal, a response to my call. Someone was definitely down there, underneath the trail, trying to communicate. My mind raced through possibilities. Old mine shaft, that was the most logical explanation. These mountains were riddled with abandoned coal mines and exploratory tunnels from the 19th and early 20th centuries. Most of them had been sealed or collapsed decades ago, but maybe someone had found an entrance, gone exploring, and gotten lost or trapped in a section that ran under the trail. I marked my GPS position, took photos of the area, and radioed back to the station. "Base, this is Torres. I'm at mile marker 47 on the ad, and I'm hearing voices and knocking sounds underneath the trail. Possible cave-in or mine shaft situation. Requesting assistance and rescue team." My supervisor's voice crackled back. "Copy that, Torres. Stay on site and keep monitoring. We'll get a team out there, but it's going to be at least 2 hours. Do not attempt to dig or investigate on your own." 2 hours. I settled in to wait, keeping my ear to the ground, listening. The knocking came again, that same pattern. 3 slow, 2 quick. I knocked back on the trail surface with my fist, trying to let whoever was down there know that help was coming. The response was immediate, more knocking, faster now, excited or desperate. I couldn't tell which. Then the voice started again, and this time I could make out words. Not all of them, but enough. "Been down here. Can't find, the tunnel keeps." The rest was too muffled, swallowed by earth and rock. But the tone was clear. Fear, exhaustion, desperation. "Help is coming," I shouted at the ground. "Rescue team is on the way. Can you tell me how you got down there? Is there an entrance nearby?" More muffled words, but I couldn't understand them. The frustration was overwhelming. This person, whoever they were, was trapped somewhere beneath my feet, close enough that I could hear them, but I had no way to reach them, no way to help beyond calling for backup and waiting. The rescue team arrived an hour and 45 minutes later. 3 guys with ground-penetrating radar, geological survey maps, and a lot of experience with mine rescue operations. They set up their equipment while I briefed them on what I'd heard. "You're sure the sounds were coming from directly beneath the trail?" the team leader asked, studying his maps. "Positive. Right about here." I pointed to the spot where I'd heard the knocking most clearly. He frowned, comparing his maps to his GPS unit. "There's no record of any mine shafts in this immediate area. Closest documented tunnel is about half a mile south. But that doesn't mean there isn't something unmarked here. Plenty of exploratory digs that never made it into official records." They ran their radar over the section of trail, and I watched their faces change as they studied the readout. Confusion, then concern, then something that looked almost like fear. "What is it?" I asked. "What are you seeing?" The team leader showed me the radar image. "There's definitely empty space down there, about 15 feet below the surface. Looks like a tunnel, maybe 6 feet high, 3 feet wide. Runs roughly parallel to the trail for at least 100 feet in either direction. So we can dig down, get them out?" "It's not that simple." He pointed to a specific part of the image. "Look at this. The tunnel walls, they're too regular, too precise. This wasn't dug by hand with picks and shovels. This was cut, almost like it was carved with machinery, but the dates don't match. According to the geological layers, this tunnel would have to be at least 200 years old, probably older. But that kind of precision cutting technology didn't exist back then. Does it matter how old it is? Someone's trapped down there right now. That's just it, Becca." He looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "We're not picking up any life signs. No heat signatures, no movement, nothing. If someone was down there, the radar would show them. But there's nobody there. The tunnel is empty. That's impossible. I heard them. I heard knocking, heard a voice. Someone is down there." They spent another hour running tests, checking and rechecking their equipment. The results never changed. The tunnel was real, but it was empty. No people, no animals, nothing living that could account for the sounds I'd heard. "Could be acoustic anomalies," one of the other team members suggested. "Sound traveling through the rock from somewhere else, bouncing around in the tunnel and emerging here. Maybe there's an opening miles away and the tunnel acts like a giant speaking tube." It was a rational explanation, and I wanted to believe it. But I'd heard that knocking, heard it respond to me in real time. That wasn't an echo or acoustic trick. That was someone communicating. The team packed up their gear and headed back, promising to file a full report and consult with some experts about the tunnel's origins. I was left standing on the trail, staring at the ground, wondering if I'd imagined the whole thing. Then I heard it again. Knocking. 3 slow, 2 quick. The same pattern, coming from the same spot. I dropped to my knees and knocked back. The response was immediate, a series of rapid knocks that sounded almost excited. Then the voice, clearer now than it had been before. "Can you hear me? Please, we've been down here for so long. The tunnel, it keeps changing. We can't find the way out." "Who are you?" I called down. "What's your name? How did you get trapped?" "My name is Static, or something like it," obscured the words. "Hiking with my group. We found an entrance near, started exploring, and then the tunnel sealed behind us. We've been trying to find another way out, but it keeps." More static, more lost words. "How many are with you? How many people are trapped?" "7 of us." "No, wait, 8. Or was it 6? It's hard to remember. We've been walking for so long. Days, maybe. Or hours. Time feels wrong down here. Something about the way they said that made my skin crawl. Time feels wrong." I pulled out my notebook and started writing down everything, every word I could make out, documenting this conversation even though I knew it sounded crazy. "Stay where you are," I called down. "Mark your location somehow. I'm going to search for the entrance you used, see if I can find a way to reach you." "No." The voice was suddenly urgent, almost panicked. "Don't come down here. The tunnel, it's not right. It's not a normal tunnel. It's alive, I think. Or it remembers. It shows you things that happened here, things that are going to happen. Please, don't come down. Just tell someone we're here. Tell them to seal it up, collapse it, make sure no one else finds it. I can't just leave you down there. You have to. We're already lost. Already part of it now. But you can still get away. Just stop listening, stop looking for us. The more you engage with the tunnel, the more it notices you. And once it notices you, the voice faded out, and no matter how much I called, there was no response. I should have listened to that warning. Should have marked the location, filed my report, and stayed away. But I couldn't. The thought of people trapped beneath the trail, slowly running out of food and water, going insane in the darkness, it haunted me. So I went back the next day, on my own time, and I started searching for the entrance they'd mentioned. I found it about a quarter-mile north of where I'd heard the voices. Not a dramatic opening, just a crack in a rock face, partially hidden by overgrown vegetation. It was narrow, barely wide enough for a person to squeeze through, but when I shined my flashlight inside, I could see it opened up into a larger passage beyond. I should have called it in. Should have waited for the rescue team, for backup, for anyone. But I was already pulling off my pack, already checking my gear, already convincing myself that I could just take a quick look, just see if there were any signs of recent passage, then come back with help. The crack was tight. I had to turn sideways to fit through, and for a few seconds I was wedged in solid rock with no room to move forward or back. Panic fluttered in my chest before I finally pushed through into the tunnel beyond. It was exactly as the radar had shown. 6 feet high, 3 feet wide, walls that were unnaturally smooth and straight. But the radar hadn't captured the markings. The walls were covered in them, carved symbols and pictographs that looked ancient. Not any writing system I recognized, but clearly deliberate, clearly meaningful to whoever had made them. I followed the tunnel, my flashlight beam cutting through darkness that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The passage ran straight for about 50 feet, then began to curve gently to the left. As I walked, I started to hear sounds. Not voices this time, but other things. Footsteps echoing from somewhere ahead. The scrape of tools against stone. Breathing that wasn't my own. The tunnel began to slope downward, and I realized I was descending much deeper than I'd intended. The 15 feet the radar had indicated should have put me roughly level with the trail, but I'd already gone down at least 30 feet, and the slope showed no signs of leveling off. That's when I saw the first one. A boot print in the dust on the tunnel floor. Fresh, maybe an hour old. I crouched down to examine it, and my heart nearly stopped. It was my boot print. Same tread pattern, same size, same distinctive wear on the heel. But I hadn't walked this section yet. I was making first tracks through undisturbed dust, or at least I thought I was. I stood up slowly, sweeping my flashlight around. That's when I noticed them. Boot prints everywhere, covering the floor, overlapping and crossing, some fresh, some old. All of them mine. The pattern was unmistakable. I'd been here before, many times, based on the number of prints. But I had no memory of it, no recollection of ever entering this tunnel before today. The footsteps I'd been hearing got louder, closer. I spun around, my flashlight revealing the tunnel behind me. Empty, but the sounds continued. Someone walking, getting nearer with each step, but no one was there. Hello. My voice sounded small and swallowed by the tunnel. Is someone there? The footsteps stopped. In the silence that followed, I heard breathing, close enough that I should have felt it on my face. But there was nothing there, just empty air and the oppressive darkness beyond my flashlight beam. Then I heard my own voice, echoing from deeper in the tunnel ahead of me. Hello? Is someone there? The exact words I'd just spoken, in my exact voice, coming from a direction I hadn't walked yet. I ran, just turned and scrambled back up the tunnel, not caring about documenting or exploring or helping anyone. The footsteps followed me, staying just behind, never catching up but never falling back. And worse, I could hear more footsteps ahead of me, moving in the direction I was running, like I was fleeing toward myself. The crack in the rock face appeared suddenly, and I squeezed through it so fast I tore my uniform and scraped my shoulder bloody. I didn't stop running until I was back at my truck, the forest around me bright and real and blessedly normal. I didn't report what I'd found. How could I? I'd gone into an unmarked cave system alone, without backup, without telling anyone. It was a massive violation of protocol. And what would I say? That I'd found a tunnel full of my own footprints and my own voice. That I'd heard people trapped beneath the trail, but couldn't find them. I tried to put it out of my mind, tried to go back to normal patrols and regular work. But I kept hearing them. Every time I walked that section of trail, I heard the voices beneath the ground. Not just one voice now, but many. Men, women, children, all muffled and distant, all calling for help. And sometimes, mixed in with the other voices, I heard my own voice calling up from below. Last week I couldn't take it anymore. I went back to the entrance with proper equipment this time, rope and carabiners, and enough supplies for a real exploration. I was going to find whoever was down there, going to document the tunnel system, going to prove I wasn't losing my mind. The entrance was gone. Not sealed or collapsed, just gone. The rock face was solid, unbroken, no crack anywhere to be found. I spent 3 hours searching the area, checking my GPS coordinates over and over, but there was no entrance. It had simply ceased to exist. Except the voices are still there. Every time I walk that section of trail, I hear them beneath the ground. Calling, pleading, warning. And the knocking, that pattern of 3 slow and 2 quick, comes up through the earth like a heartbeat. Yesterday, I brought the ground-penetrating radar back, borrowed it without authorization, and ran my own scan. The tunnel is still there, still visible on the radar, still showing as empty of life signs. But this time I saw something new in the image. Movement, or the suggestion of it. Shapes in the tunnel that appeared and disappeared, like people walking back and forth, but too quick to be captured clearly. And I saw something else that made me drop the equipment and back away. On the radar, about 20 feet into the tunnel, directly below where I was standing, there was a figure. Standing still, facing upward, arms raised like they were trying to reach through solid rock. The dimensions matched my height, my build. And even though the radar couldn't show details like that, I knew with absolute certainty that the figure was me. I'm writing this because I don't know how much longer I can trust my own perceptions. I've started finding things that suggest I've been entering that tunnel, even though I have no memory of it. Mud on my boots that matches the composition of the tunnel floor. Scratches and scrapes that line up with squeezing through that crack in the rock. Time gaps in my schedule, hours I can't account for, where I seem to have completed patrols I don't remember doing. And this morning, when I was getting ready for work, I found something in my jacket pocket that I definitely didn't put there. A piece of paper, torn from a notebook like the one I carry. Written on it, in my handwriting, was a message: "Stop looking for us. We're not trapped down there. We are down there." The tunnel doesn't trap people. It collects them. Every version of them that ever walked above it. Every footstep that ever pressed against the earth over it. It takes a piece and keeps it. You've been feeding it every time you patrol that section. There are dozens of you down here now, maybe hundreds, walking the same tunnels, calling up to yourself, trying to warn yourself. But you won't listen. You never listen. None of us did. RT, my initials, my handwriting, my warning to myself from whatever version of me exists down there in those impossible tunnels. I've requested a transfer to a different forest, a different state, anywhere that's not here. I don't know if distance will help. Don't know if I can escape something I've already been feeding for months without knowing it. But I have to try, because last night I had a dream. I was walking through the tunnel, my flashlight illuminating walls covered in symbols. And as I walked, I passed other versions of myself, all walking the same direction, all carrying flashlights that cast the same beam. An infinite regression of Rebecca Torres, walking forever through tunnels beneath the trail, calling up to a version of herself that still exists in the sunlight, still thinks she's real, still hasn't figured out that she's already part of what lives below. In the dream, I looked down at my feet and saw that I was walking on something soft. Not stone or earth, but footprints. Layer upon layer of footprints, pressed so deep and so thick they'd become their own surface. All my footprints, from every time I'd ever walked above, compressed into a new kind of ground for the tunnel to expand through. I woke up with dirt under my fingernails and the taste of earth in my mouth. The voices beneath the trail are getting louder. I can hear them even when I'm not in the forest, even when I'm home in my apartment. Muffled and desperate, calling my name, asking me to come down and join them. Promising that it's peaceful below, that time doesn't hurt there, that I can rest once I stop fighting and accept what I've already become. 3 slow knocks, too quick. The pattern follows me everywhere now, echoing up through floorboards, through concrete, through the earth itself. A heartbeat that isn't mine, but is made from pieces of me, fragments I've been leaving behind every time I walked above those tunnels. If you're a ranger reading this, if you ever hear voices beneath the trail, if you ever hear knocking coming from underground, don't investigate. Don't try to help. Don't even acknowledge that you've heard it. Because the tunnel, whatever it is, however it exists, it's always listening, always collecting, always waiting for you to take that first step down into the darkness. And once you do, once you become aware of what's beneath, you'll start leaving pieces of yourself there. Until eventually, there's more of you below than above. Until you can't tell which version is real anymore. The knocking is getting louder. 3 slow, 2 quick. My own signal, calling from beneath my feet. I think I'm going to answer it soon. I think I've already answered it many times. I think I've been down there all along, walking those tunnels, calling up to myself, trying to warn the version of me that still believes she's whole. The transfer won't help. Distance won't help. Because the tunnel isn't just beneath that one section of trail. It's everywhere I've ever walked. It's underneath everything. And I've been feeding it with every step I've ever taken. 3 slow knocks, 2 quick. That's me, calling from below. I should go down and answer. I think I already have.
Story 11. I work in a national park. The mountains move at night. I've been a backcountry ranger for almost 12 years, and I've seen a lot of strange things in the Appalachians. Things I can explain, things I can rationalize, and things I just file away and don't think too hard about. But what happened last fall, what I'm still trying to convince myself didn't happen, has shaken me in a way I can't shake loose. I'm writing this because I can't sleep. Not anymore. Not since I realized I'm not the only one who's heard what the mountains do after dark. Let me start at the beginning. Late September is one of our busiest times. Leaves turning, tourists pouring in, hikers pretending they know what strenuous means on the trail guide. Every ranger ends up doing double duty. Patrolling, answering questions, rescuing a few cocky folks who think bear spray is optional. That week, I was assigned to Sector 3, which is mostly ridge trails and old coal mining cuts stretching along a long, narrow valley. The terrain is steep, but predictable: switchbacks, narrow ledges, exposed rock. You could blindfold me and I'd still know the smell of the air by elevation. That's the thing. I knew this place. I trusted it, which is why the shift still haunts me. Dispatch called just before 3 p.m. asking me to do another sweep of Ridgeback Trail. Family reported their son overdue returning from a solo hike, early 20s, experienced enough, but the kind of kid who thought cell service was a guarantee instead of a suggestion. Sunsets at 7:02, I remember telling dispatch. If he's not already on his way down, he's not going to love the dark. They chuckled. Keep your radio on. Holler if you need backup. So I hiked. The trail was empty, quiet, too quiet. Leaves weren't rustling. Birds were dead silent. Even the wind was missing. Felt like the world was holding its breath. I found the kid's boot prints about 3 miles up, easy enough to follow. He'd gone off trail near a rocky overlook where we had an old boundary marker hammered into the ground. Nothing alarming. People wander all the time. But what made me pause was the boundary marker itself. It wasn't where it was supposed to be. It should have been embedded in a slab of granite on the left side of the overlook. Instead, it was standing in the dirt about 10 feet away, leaning at an angle like someone had tugged it out of the rock, like pulling up a tent stake. That didn't make sense. The marker weighed maybe 40 pounds. The metal was bolted deep into the stone. I crouched, ran my hand along the groove in the granite where it used to sit. Fresh scrape marks, raw stone, like it had been yanked out that morning. I remember swallowing hard and saying aloud, "Okay, that's weird. I should have radioed it in." But I kept going, following the kid's tracks deeper into the woods. I didn't find him, at least not that night. The sun dropped faster than I expected, and the temperature with it. I was maybe 2 hours up trail when I realized how dark the ridge had gotten. My radio crackled when I tried to call dispatch. Not unusual. High areas block signals, but tonight the static sounded strange, garbled, like someone whispering through the interference. I turned it off. The noise made the hair on my arms stand up. When the last bit of daylight bled out, I switched on my headlamp and kept moving. I was about to round a rock outcrop I'd walked past 100 times before, except it wasn't there. No boulder, no familiar turn in the trail. Instead, open space. I frowned, backed up a few steps, checked my compass, checked my GPS. Both said I was on the trail, but the trail that should have curved left was now a long, straight stretch heading uphill. I stood there, breathing hard, telling myself fatigue was messing with me, that I must have taken a branching path without noticing. Then, quietly, deeply, from somewhere below the ridge, I heard something move. Not a bear, not an elk, not anything on four legs. Sounded like shifting weight, the earth adjusting itself. A low, dragging rumble, like giant rocks sliding into place. The ground beneath me trembled, just slightly, but enough that dust shook loose from the trees. I froze. It passed after a few seconds. Just a tremor, a vibration, and then everything was silent again. I tried to calm myself. Small rock slide, I thought, happens all the time. But then the next realization hit me like a punch. The rumble had happened directly beneath where the boundary marker used to sit. I checked my watch. It was 8:14 p.m., and that was when I heard a distant voice. "Hello!" Then, panicked. Human, the missing kid. I called out, "Stay where you are. I'm coming." But the moment I stepped off the trail, my light caught something at the edge of the path. A footprint. A human footprint, bare, small, and sunk deep into the dirt. It was fresh, maybe minutes old, and there were more of them, leading downslope into a narrow, rocky cut I didn't recognize at all. I lifted my radio, tried again. Static. Not normal static, almost like breathing behind the signal. I shut it off and followed the prints. That was my mistake. The prints led me into a small ravine I swear had never existed before. The trees here were different too. Older, taller. Their roots cracked through the earth like something had rearranged the ground recently. My beam hit something metal. Another boundary marker. Just lying there. Bent in the middle like something had twisted it. A little farther I found a second. And a third. All of them torn out of rock-hard soil like they were saplings. Tossed in a line leading deeper in. "Hello," I called again. "You injured? Talk to me." The kid answered, but faintly. Words I couldn't make out. I moved faster, ducking under roots that shouldn't have been exposed, stepping around boulders that hadn't been part of the terrain before. Everything looked wrong, shifted, like someone had rearranged the entire hillside with careless hands. At some point, the air changed, got colder, thinner. I realized, with a surge of panic, that I wasn't on the mountain anymore. I was in it. The ravine had narrowed into a low tunnel formed of rock and tangled roots. Not a cave. More like the mountain had cracked open slightly, revealing a hollow space inside itself. My headlamp flickered as I moved inside. That's when I smelled it. Damp stone, cold mud, and something else. Like old, forgotten air rushing to escape whatever had recently opened. "Kid!" I shouted. "Keep talking." Silence. Then that low, dragging rumble again, closer now, deep enough to vibrate my teeth. The ground shifted under me, tilting slightly, like something massive had shifted its weight somewhere above or below me. Mountains don't move. Everyone knows that. But that night, I swear on everything I have left to believe in, they did. I crouched, bracing myself against the wall of the tunnel. Dirt sifted down. Roots twitched like they were under tension. Then my headlamp cut out completely. Pitch black. I froze, breathing hard, listening. My own heartbeat sounded like thunder in the tiny space. Then, a single sharp crack from the darkness, like stones splitting. Another shift. The tunnel squeezing, closing. I scrambled backward on instinct, scraping my palms, hitting my shins, feeling the earth tilting under me. My hand slammed against cold metal, the bent boundary marker lying across the floor, so I grabbed it and used it like a rail to pull myself back the way I'd come. My headlamp flickered back on just enough to show me something I still can't explain. The tunnel behind me was gone. Just earth. Packed tight like it had never been open. Something had closed it. Something had decided it didn't want me down there. I stumbled back onto the ridge trail, gasping like I'd run a marathon. The forest was eerily calm, like nothing had happened. But the kid wasn't there. I searched until sunrise, called for him until my voice cracked. When my radio finally reconnected to dispatch around dawn, they sent backup. A full search team combed the area. We found him 2 days later, alive, shivering and dehydrated, but alive. He was curled up in the hollow of a massive fallen tree about a mile from where I'd heard his voice. He didn't have any injuries besides scratches and exhaustion. When they brought him in, he wouldn't look at me. He wouldn't look at anyone. But when the EMT asked him why he'd left the trail, he whispered just loud enough for me to hear, "The mountain wasn't right anymore." When the EMT gently asked him what he meant, he shook his head violently and muttered, "It kept moving. It didn't want me on it. Kept closing the trails." I heard it breathing. I felt ice crawl up my spine. I started to step closer to him, to ask what he meant, but the kid flinched away and added, "It listens. Please don't make me say more. It listens when you talk about it." The EMT gave me a confused look. I said nothing. I didn't want to say anything. Not where the mountains could hear. 5 Aftermath, and the thing no ranger talks about, the official report says the kid became disoriented due to low visibility and fatigue. That's the language they use when they don't want to scare tourists. But rangers talk, quietly, carefully, in low voices when we're far from the ridgelines. And once I started asking, not openly but subtle questions, I learned something I wish I hadn't. I'm not the first ranger who heard mountains shift after dark. I'm not the first to find boundary markers torn out like weeds. I'm not the first to hear breathing where there shouldn't be breathing. One veteran ranger, someone I respect, told me this in a calm, steady tone over coffee one morning. "You ever wonder why the old trails don't match the historical maps? Or why the satellite data changes after earthquakes that never happened? Mountains aren't as still as people think. They're old things, living things in a way, and sometimes they roll over in their sleep." He sipped his coffee and added, "We don't hike after dark for a reason." Another ranger told me that the narrow ravines that appear and disappear have been quietly reported since the 1970s. Another told me the missing persons cases always cluster after nights where people hear the low rumbling. Another said she stopped doing backcountry patrols entirely after she heard her own echo coming from under the ground. Not repeating her words, breathing in sync with her. I don't know if any of that is true, but I know what I experienced. I know what I heard, and I know what closed that tunnel behind me. 6. The part 1 haven't told anyone. There's one final detail I didn't put in the report. Didn't tell the other rangers. Didn't tell anyone until now. When I crawled out of that moving tunnel, when I finally got back onto the ridge, something followed me out. Not physically, not footsteps or shadows. Something else. The ground under my boots vibrated once. Just a faint ripple, like the mountain exhaled. And in that moment, right before my headlamp flickered back on, I heard a whisper. Not in my ears, in the earth beneath my hands. A low, groaning voice carried through stone and soil. "Not this time." Then silence. Total, perfect silence. And the tunnel closed. I don't go into Sector 3 anymore. I traded shifts to avoid it. I lied about knee pain to get reassigned. I told my supervisor I prefer lower elevations. They didn't question it, because every ranger out here knows. Some parts of the mountains are old enough to have moods, old enough to move when they're restless, old enough to swallow you if you step in the wrong place at the wrong time. And when the sun goes down, the mountains shift in their sleep. Sometimes whisper to each other, sometimes take things, sometimes almost take people. And the only reason I'm still here writing this is because whatever lives under those ridges decided it didn't want me. Not this time. I'm terrified of what happens when it changes its mind.